All right, all right. What's up, everybody? Welcome, welcome. I am here with Anne, and we are going to be reviewing a discussion that you had. So it's going to be a little weird for you to review a discussion that you yourself are in. I did this before with myself, and it was really weird. I was like, wait, who's talking? Am I talking? So we'll see how that goes. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and what brought this about, like why we're reviewing this? Like, give us some context here.
Cool. Yeah. So I am Anne. I have a YouTube channel called Through the Lens where I interview psychologists, philosophers, sorry, sociologists, all sorts of people from different academic fields. I myself am a psychology major. I actually graduate in a month exactly to the day. So I will be going into a master's of social work plan, and then I plan to do philosophy, psychology adjacent research. So that's really exciting. I'm getting closer and closer to doing that. Yeah, I had this conversation with Andrew because I had a run-in with him on TikTok, actually. And he kind of left, and Brian, who's the host of the Whatever podcast, reached out to me and said, hey, I'd actually really love to have you on the show. So let's set that up and then we'll get talking. And the original plan was to talk about feminism, but the reason that we're reviewing it is because we get into metaethics and rights and all sorts of confusion about that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. Were you prepared for the metaethics stuff, or did it kind of surprise you that he brought it up?
I was somewhat prepared. I had seen a lot of his debates like that before where he gets into that and how confused he is on like those topics. So I was pretty prepared. I had a lot of people warn me like, hey, it's almost necessarily going to come up if you talk to Andrew about anything.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that we could maybe discuss before we start playing this, which is, a lot of the people he talks to don't have a philosophy background, and it seems like it's pretty easy to blindside somebody by bringing up topics they're not expecting, they're not prepared for, they don't have the vocabulary for, and to expect them to be able to go toe to toe with you. And strategically, it's not my favorite thing to do, to approach that in such an aggressive way. If I were presenting a metaethics discussion to someone that didn't have the vocabulary, I might do some work to try to lay it out for them, but it doesn't look like he does that. So do you have any thoughts on like why he brings this up, or what you think about the fact that he does so?
Oh, I think it's, well, like I said, a lot of the conversation was supposed to be centered around feminism. I think there's something there because it's like these red-pilled, I don't want to say incel, but these right-winger like spaces, they'll do this a lot where they'll have a man who runs a podcast and he does debates sometimes, and he's very well versed on political topics. And then sometimes he has a little bit of knowledge in metaethics. And then they'll bring on an OnlyFans model who doesn't have formal education, graduated high school, maybe went to college a little bit, but has no knowledge of any sort of philosophical topic and just has an opinion they want to talk about. And that's his like in to use that. And I think it's, I think it's really scummy. I think it's like a tactic to just like embarrass women. I really think that's what it is.
Yeah, it's just, if you're going to talk to somebody that doesn't have a background in the topic, just my general approach isn't to try to browbeat them with questions that they're not prepared to answer because they may not understand what I'm asking them.
Yeah.
So like questions like, and also his questions, I got to be honest, they're not particularly good. So like stuff like, so you're the ultimate arbiter, which we'll see.
Oh,
what the hell does that mean? It's just, it's a very strange way of phrasing things that I think you could add some philosophical rigor to it, but he uses a lot of phrases that he doesn't unpack. And if I were talking to somebody that I knew didn't have a background, I would like help them out by explaining what I meant. And he doesn't do that. So regardless, I can't read people's minds. I don't know what his motives are. Maybe he's doing it for the reasons that you think. Maybe he's not. I really can't. I have this strong aversion to try to impute motives to people, regardless of whether I suspect they're good or they're bad or whatever. So I prefer to just focus on objectively like what they're doing and what the consequences of what they're doing are. Even if I have in other cases, there's lots of cases where I'm like, I think this person doesn't have good motives in some conversation or not, but I don't push that point. So this is just a case where if you're going to go like to debate a topic with somebody like quantum physics or something and they don't know anything about it, I wouldn't lord that over the person. And I don't think you should do that.
Yeah, there was at some point, and I tried really hard to remain like stoic during the conversation because there were times where he really infuriated me, where he would do these things like ask about a topic or like bring something up, and he almost seemed surprised that I knew what he was talking about, which happens sometimes. But yeah, I don't like to do the whole attributing motives. I just happen to feel very strongly about what I believe his motives are. But I definitely don't do that in the conversation. I make sure not to do that, like say, oh, you're being bad faith, because he accuses me, I think, of being bad faith at one point. I don't like to do that kind of thing either.
Oh, sure. I wasn't criticizing you for doing that. I think I'm a
Oh, no.
little overly cautious with attributing motives to people. Like even when if someone said, "Look, neutrally speaking, you gotta put a bet down here. You have to." I think I could bet on people's motives just as much as anybody else.
Yeah.
What I don't want to see. So there's two things. One is I don't want to see people do that in the middle of a conversation as a reason to dismiss a person's arguments, which I don't think you did.
Yeah.
And the second is just that I want to encourage norms in the online community space of not being so quick to accuse people of bad faith or being disingenuous. People are so quick to do that, so much so that I sometimes wonder if they even know what those words mean. So you'll say something someone disagrees with, and they'll say, "You're being disingenuous," and it's like, no, you just disagree with me.
Yeah.
There's no particular reason to think I'm like not sincere. It's very strange that people do this,
Right.
but I see it everywhere. It's all on TikTok. It's all on YouTube in the comments. Bad faith, disingenuous. It's real weird.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's probably just entertaining for people. I don't know why, but it's entertaining for them to do that.
Yeah, a lot of the internet stuff is just blood sports. Now
Yeah.
I gotta do Lance Loop, but I didn't get a good sense of when people started, so I'm gonna start it arbitrarily at 2:05. So we'll give it to Oscar for 1,000 Lance Loot. And if you have, I don't know how many of my videos you've seen because I started doing this more recently. So if you don't know what Lance Loot is about, it's a
Oh, I'm in
mystery.
the
You'll have to
comments
watch
all
other
the
videos.
time. All good.
Oh, okay, cool. All right, Harmonica Luke gets 500, and Alex gets 250. And we've got. I know it's April Fool's, but we're not doing any April Fool's stuff. So like,
Yeah.
it's just there's not any like I could have reviewed a video and like pretended that I'm a moral realist or something, but
Oh,
it
that
wasn't
would have
really
been
like
fun.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I did that last year, and everyone kind of, or at some point, and I don't want to keep doing the same thing. Okay, let's get into the video. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. So here's the video, everybody. Let's check it out. If audience, we tested this before, and the audio sounded good for us. But if there's any huge issues, like the audio is radically different from the volume of our voices, do let me know in the chat. But I'm not going to do that thing where I sit there waiting for everybody to confirm. So we're just going to play it. And you could just let me know when you want to pause it to comment. Okay.
Cool. Yeah.
Cool. All right. It's not playing. I'm hitting play. Oh, I'm in the wrong video. There we go.
Talk about egalitarianism being, so let's start with this, I guess. Are rights real?
Real in what sense?
Do they materially exist anywhere? Or are they concepts of the mind?
Yeah, rights are concepts of the mind.
Yeah, so they don't actually exist, right?
This is so I just got to say that's already weird. Like, are they materially real? Does he mean like rights are like a physical thing you could go find? Like, oh, there's a right over there. I got a piece of a right.
I'm actually not sure what he thinks there. And I wish I don't have enough time, or I didn't have enough time with him to continue and like press that and be like, what do you even mean? Like, because he doesn't think that. He doesn't think that there's like this thing that you can hold and touch and feel and it's rights and that's what it is. Like, that would just be absurd.
Right. So if he doesn't think they're materially real, why is he giving you this dichotomy between basically, is it a physical thing or a concept? And if you say it's a concept, then he's like, all right, so you don't think they're real.
Yeah.
As if concepts aren't real. And then
Yeah.
what does he mean by real? So I don't know what he means by material. I don't know what he means by real. I don't know what he means by material or conceptual. And then conceptual things aren't real. There's like a whole bunch of ambiguity, under specificity, a false dichotomy. There's a lot. It's like 5 seconds of him talking, and I already have at least 3 issues.
Yeah, he gets into this thing later where he talks about like, well, if rights aren't material, then they're not really real. And that means that rights are really only the things, like the force that we use to protect rights, essentially. So he's saying like, okay, well, without like the police force or the army or something, like, then rights don't really exist. I was like, that's just totally confused. That's just the thing. You're saying that there is something to be protected, and then we're using this enforcement arm to protect that thing. So the thing is separate from the enforcement arm, presumably, then, even if it's not material.
Yeah, I wonder how he would respond to this sort of question, because you could ask him something like, are numbers a material thing, or are they concepts? And if he said that they're concepts, you could say, oh, so numbers aren't real. So
Yeah.
like you can't add, you can't pay your taxes. Like there's no, if you see it like if you don't know how many children you have, there's no
Right,
such thing as
yeah.
numbers. Like I don't know what it looks like he's throwing stuff at you, hoping it's like there. I see. I'm attributing motives. I got to avoid that. This just looks like a conceptually underdeveloped and confused ideas.
Yeah, yeah. And it's the conclusion is supposed to be something like, well, rights aren't really real materially. So if the only thing that is real is the way that they're enforced, and the people who are enforcing them are men, which I have plenty of qualms with, then, you know, men are the ones who give and take rights. Like that's his conclusion from all of this stuff that he wants to posit.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's strange, but I guess we'll see if he can get there. Did you have anything to say on this, like further on this? Just the first, I'm known for like doing videos where it's like 3 seconds and I will comment for like an hour. But anything else further for you to add?
No, I mean, you'll see most of what he says is just kind of continues on this really weird path.
All right.
No, something that's a concept still exists.
Where?
Yeah, like feelings exist, thoughts exist.
Where?
They exist within the mind. You just said that.
Yeah, where's that?
In the mind.
Where
in
is that,
your-
though?
In brains.
So the brain exists inside the mind?
The mind is constituted of the brain.
The brain is the mind then?
That might be a semantic thing, but I'm fine with saying however you want to parse out those terms, that yes, concepts come from minds. Minds either are or come from brains.
Okay, so, well, is the mind the brain?
Look, that's a complex question I don't have the answer to.
I don't either. So I just want to make sure that I understand where concepts exist.
I mean, look, if you just want to say the brain just for simplicity, that's fine. I'm not sure. Like, are you like well versed on philosophy of mind or something? Is that like?
I'm not trying to move you into
Okay.
philosophy of mind. I'm just trying to ask you about rights being a concept. Because when I
Sure.
say that they're not real, you say they are real because concepts are real.
Right.
But I don't understand how concepts themselves are real.
Yeah, they're real as in they're things that are from the mind.
Okay, so
Like thoughts. You wouldn't say a thought is not a real thing. A thought is a real thing.
well, when you say objective or subjective, what do you mean by objective?
When you say objective or subjective. So I know you respond to this, but
Yeah, I hadn't said objective or subjective yet. I giggle at that part where he just looks at me and very seriously asks me, "Is the mind the brain?" I'm like, what the hell does that have to do with this conversation at all? I mean, that's why I ask him, like, are you trying to get into like philosophy of mind stuff, or it was just very strange. He later gets into it and kind of points and goes like, oh, well, since they're in each individual person's mind, then you can't have like this universal thing. There can't be like agreed upon things because they're not the exact same concept in every person's mind. And I respond to that like, no, of course we can approximate concepts. Like that's how you live your life. You go to the store, and if you ask the clerk like, where are the like t-shirts or something, you don't go like, okay, wait, is my concept of a t-shirt different from the store clerk's concept of a t-shirt? How do we know we're really talking about the same thing? You just kind of move about your day, and like, if you're right, you're right. If you're wrong, you're wrong. Like, it's just so confused.
yeah, there's also just something strange about him saying when you say, and then attributing claims to you in like terms
Right.
that you did not use. I don't know, like the most charitable read I could have on it is that he thought that that's implied by what you're saying, and then like just sort of is conflating his presumptions with what you've said.
Right. Really early on, he does the thing where he goes, so you're a relativist. And I was like, wait a second, I haven't even said I'm a relativist. Like I could have some weird like combo view where I think some moral facts are mind independent and some are mind dependent. I could have a totally mixed view. I could have, that just doesn't, yeah, it was just a weird part of the convo where he just started using words I wasn't using.
Yeah, it's a strange pivot because I mean it starts with a question that is like straddling ethics and metaphysics. Are rights real? Then it's like philosophy of mind stuff, and now it's suddenly maybe meta ethics, but objective and relative could be meant in an ethical sense or a non-ethical sense. So it's not even clear. So
Right.
that's like a rather rapid topic jumping. It might be that he's like looking to get something to sink his teeth into to continue the conversation, and that doesn't have to be a bad thing. But I don't know what's going on here. Like I'm looking at this from this like outsider perspective, and I'm like, what is his objective here? This is very strange to observe.
Yeah, that's how a lot of the conversation in person went too. It was, I mean, I'll just say this kind of as a side note. It was very messily set up to begin with. The prompt initially was just, hey, you guys will talk about feminism. And then when I got there, they kind of said like, oh, you know, we talked about some other prompts. Maybe we could throw in abortion or veganism and other sorts of stuff. And I was like, wait a second, can we like pick a proposition and like stick to it? And he's admittedly like not very good at doing that. He's very all over the place, and it was very hard to pin him down and keep him on one thing at a time. So that was difficult. So you're not alone. That was how it felt in person also. Like, what is this guy talking about? Can we stay on track?
Yeah, I wonder how he would react, because I've seen discussions and typically he seems to be taking the kind of interrogative role. I wonder how well he tends to stay on topic in other contexts. I just haven't had an opportunity to see. But topic jumping is difficult to manage, because if you try to say, look, can we stay on topic, or why are you trying to veer off topic? That can upset people, and it can also make it look like you're trying to dodge, like you're trying to be evasive.
Yes.
Like, no, I want to stay on track because I can't handle this stuff off to the side. And you know, you will get really nasty and totally uncharitable comments from people that will look at someone trying to keep a conversation on track and see that as a bad thing, which is weird.
Yeah, there's one point where I think I asked him a question, and he asked me a question in response to that before answering. And I said something like, no, hold on. I proceeded to, I think, restate the question or something like that. And he goes, you're answering a question without answering my question, or you're asking a question without answering my question first. And in my head, I just kind of like froze, and I was like, are you kidding me? Are you serious? Like, I'm trying to keep my cool, because he's just like you said, all over the place. He's like a leapfrog, just everywhere. But if I say, hey, you know, like, why aren't you answering this question? He is pretty combative. So yeah.
Yeah, a bit of a double standard there.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, let's keep going.
Objective or subjective?
I didn't use those words, but usually in philosophy, objective means mind independent,
Yes.
and subjective means mind dependent.
Okay, right. So concepts, then, they're dependent on a mind?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so they don't exist absent a mind.
They don't exist absence of minds? No.
Okay, so if all human beings were gone, rights would not exist because the concepts would be gone, right?
Well, I didn't say human minds. There could be, you know, some alien, you know, the xenomorphs or whatever, come down and they have their own concepts of rights. Then, yeah, I mean, that's still a mind. They have rights, etc.
Yeah, no, sure. If there was aliens, they would. Okay,
Just to clarify, it's
yeah.
not just human minds. It is just,
Yeah.
you know, minds that can conceptualize of rights.
whatever those.
Yeah, I just have to say there's a bit of ambiguity here, because there's this common sense of mind dependent, where the claim is something like minds are necessary in order for the thing to exist, and it's some sort of like dependence relation. And that could be something like pain requires a mind, or happiness requires a mind. And then there's the truth making sense that is typically meant in meta ethics, where it's something like a stance or attitude or mental state that makes a particular propositional claim true. Like, I prefer strawberry ice cream over vanilla ice cream, and that makes the proposition strawberry ice cream is better than vanilla ice cream true when it's indexed to my standards. I think you talk about indexing later, but it looks like he's immediately taken mind dependent and mind independent in the former sense, not the latter sense.
Yeah, I do regret not using the word stance, but I also am not sure where that would have gotten me with him. Maybe it would have made it easier, maybe it wouldn't have, but yeah, I do wish I would have used the word stance instead of mind, because he does get that little bit of confusion where he says, like, I think maybe that's why he goes into like the is the mind the brain thing? Or I'm like, I can't answer that. I don't know why you asked me that at all. But that might be, I mean, that's probably just like a little footnote for, if I talk to him again, which I have been invited back.
Yes, to be fair, it's not clear from the context yet which sense of mind depend, like by objective and subjective, what he's going for, because those are both of those are completely legitimate ways of drawing the distinction. And this is so I don't see him making a mistake there. I just see a failure to adequately disambiguate. I don't know that anybody in particular is to blame for that. It is an unfortunate feature of contemporary philosophy that we have terms that signify substantively different conceptual distinctions, and we use all that freezing is frustrating. We use the same terms for different distinctions, and people don't disambiguate, and that is just massively frustrating. It's one of the things. Like, I'm not even commenting on this discussion. I'll just comment on academic philosophy. Can't they sit down and iron out, okay, we're going to use these words for these distinctions and these words for those distinctions? Like, this would never fly in biology or physics or any other field, to have such inconsistent and unclear use of terminology. So partially not, I don't see, this is just an unfortunate feature of philosophy. I don't know that he's really mixed anything up just yet. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, just from my background, I see a little bit of that in psychology, actually. And I'm more into the field of like clinical abnormal psych kind of sphere. I'm not into a lot of the like philosophical side of it, although I have been getting more into it and I'm really excited about that. But I do see actually kind of the same problem a little bit, where there'll be words that are used, which is kind of just a natural symptom of like psychology, is that you have to use the words that people, your average person, use to describe themselves or their feelings or whatever. But some of those words, they get turned into like technical terms, and then it's like, okay, well, we have to make sure that this person understands what a psychologist means by identity in the same way that the psychologist is using it, or something like that. So I do see that issue, and yeah, I do see the confusion watching it back.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see where it ends up going.
Minds are.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, got it. So when we're talking about rights, though, you exist, they don't exist in any sort of material reality.
That question hinges upon the, like, is the mind the brain or not?
You can't taste them, touch them, smell them, see them, that kind of thing.
Sure. No, of course not.
Yeah. Okay, got it. So rights, for all intents and purposes, are just things that we make up.
Sure. That doesn't make them any less real.
Well, I guess we're going to have to clear this up again then. Real how? Is a unicorn real?
Well, as a fictional concept, yeah.
As a concept, it's real.
As a fiction, just to be clear. There's a way that fiction is used in a technical sense. I'm not super familiar with it, but you can point to things that are fiction and things that aren't fiction. So it would be like, well, maybe Spider-Man is real in a sense, but he's real in a fictional way. He's still real, right? There's still a book. There's still movies about him. There's still actors that play him. In a sense, there is...
Well, he's real in your mind.
Spider-Man, right? Well, there are material things tied to Spider-Man, right? But there is a real concept of Spider-Man. He's just real in a fictional sense.
Got it. So then for you, rights actually do exist as more than... They're not... When you say concept, you actually believe concepts are real in some sense.
I think they're real in a mind-dependent way.
Mind-dependent.
When you say, so I think what you're doing here, and you can correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm making sure we just don't equivocate.
But it seems like what you are doing might be a little bit of that. It might seem like you're saying something is only real if and only if it's material. Do you believe that or no?
I don't. No.
Okay.
I'm just making sure that we get the view clear.
Sure, yeah. So there can be real things, even if we don't have a specific definition, there can be real things that aren't material.
Yeah, concepts.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, got it. So rights are a concept.
Yeah, they are a concept, but they are real. But in the sense that concepts, in the sense that concepts are real. Right, just like your feelings are real, just like your thoughts, your dreams are real.
Got it. And concepts are changeable, right? Just like rights.
The concepts themselves, yeah, the way that people think of things, yeah. Those things can change. Sure.
Okay. So we've established that rights are just concepts. Concepts can be real. I'll just agree in that sense because, again, it doesn't really matter, I guess, in this particular confine. So
any thoughts on that exchange there? That was interesting. It looks like he's trying to clarify things and get things ironed out.
Yeah, I mean, how kind of him to just agree. It's really strange. I had a conversation with Lane Taylor. He's on TikTok. He does philosophy stuff. You might enjoy his stuff. about this thing where he he goes, well, if they're mind dependently real, then they're not really real, but it's fine. I'll just kind of like let you have that point. Or the thing with he's a Catholic, I believe, or some form of Christian at least. He believes in the soul. So he does believe there's non-material, real things, and he doesn't have any problem accepting that concept at all. But for some reason, he has a problem accepting this concept of rights being real, but in a non-physical way. Which I don't even, maybe I have some qualms with the non-physical talk, but in the sense that like, okay, well, a soul can exist and you can't touch or feel or, see a soul.
Yeah, I have problems with the non-physical talk because I'm not a physicalist, and it might partially be for me. It's part of the problem is the underspecificity of what that would mean. But I don't have any problem at all. Look, I would be a little wary of talking about concepts existing or being real. I'd really just want someone to be clear on what they're asking me. Like, what does that even mean? But I don't have any problem with saying that like patterns of the interactions between things are real, or that it often seems like people think that if you think something is real, that it's got to be like a noun and it's got to be something you could hold. But then think of things like jumping. Like I can't have a piece of jumping. You don't have a chunk of talking. You don't have like particles of sleeping. And yet animals sleep. Like verbs are real. Like events occur. But the event isn't the physical thing. It's what the physical things are doing. Do people think that physicalists are so stupid that it never occurred to them that objects do stuff?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. Those are good examples. Not only am I confused, and obviously like you're also confused at like what he's really trying to get at there. I'm actually not even sure he knows what he's trying to get at there. And that's not a dig at him. That's just genuinely, I think that sometimes people think that they have concepts that aren't like fully fleshed out. And so when they ask these questions, they're kind of asking them on a little bit of like shaky ground, where he might not even really quite understand what he's asking.
Yeah. Oh, well, it just, let's say that you take something like boundaries or borders. So if I say, hey, this is my property, and you and society agree, like we do, like we get like an appraiser or whatever they're called, that they go out and they like check the property lines. Like the borders between one property and another are real. It doesn't mean you could go out there and like locate a piece of the border, but the sense in which they're real is a sense in which there are social and institutional facts about how groups of people have opted to treat one another. And so they're real in the sense that there are expectations that are instantiated in and dependent on the goals, standards, attitudes, and other sorts of psychological states of interacting social beings that can reliably lead to expectations about like future interactions. Like if someone puts a shed over the property line, I'm going to go out and say, hey, what are you doing? That's my property. You can like predict future events of them. So there's some sort of material consequences to the reality of these concepts, even if the concepts themselves don't directly refer to physical objects. I don't see any problem with that. And I don't think physicalists are going to struggle a whole lot to say that like socially constructed realities can sit on top of an ontology that is fundamentally reducible to physical objects and the interaction of physical objects. They're just going to reduce all that to certain sorts of like psychological facts that are instantiated in behaviors. So there's going to be this like higher level explanation that could be reduced to the lower level explanations, but there's not any like extra substances. It's not like you need substance dualism to account for borders between countries. So I don't know what metaphysical work he's trying to do here, but I don't think it's getting him anywhere. Maybe at this point he's realizing that that's not going to go anywhere and he's giving up on that. I don't know.
I think eventually he does, because he moves away from the rights talk to like other, topics about feminism and then meta ethics and stuff like that. But it's really weird because I'm not big into the whole rights stuff in philosophy, but I am big into that kind of stuff in like the sociological field. So like I'm fine with talking about rights as like contracts, things like that. I'm well versed on that stuff. But when you start saying like there's something to a right that is like ooey gooey metaphysically weird, like I have no interest in that at all. And two, it's just like, well, what are you even talking about? What are you trying to get at here? But what he wants to do is take this and go, Well, if they're not, real, then the only thing that we should really talk about is their real application in the real world. And then the real application is that, whatever he brings it to, men are stronger than women, therefore men get to make up the rights. Like, that's his whole weird goal there at the end of the conversation.
Yeah.
Which is just silly in and
Okay.
of its own right.
Yeah, it's just, I'm looking at like this comment from the chat. Holy shit, this is from JPW. Holy shit, 10 minutes of him questioning whether concepts can be real just to say, yeah, I'll agree in that sense. That, it might be that he thought there was something there and it turned out that there wasn't. On the other
Right.
hand, the uncharitable reading is that he's looking for problems, and if he can't find any, he moves on. So I'll float that as a possibility, and maybe he would just acknowledge that he's, looking for chinks in the philosophical armor. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but it doesn't look to me like the most productive way of pursuing a conversation. It's too uncooperative. Like if you're talking to somebody, you're trying to understand their view. I think he's giving off the vibe of he's just trying to understand the view, but it looks like, I'll put it this way, it looks like he's fishing for problems.
Yeah, I got that vibe for sure.
And so I don't like to attribute motives, but if he's not doing that, I hope he can appreciate that it sure as hell looks like it. And maybe he should change his strategy or his approach to people to not even give the impression of doing something. Because like if I gave the impression that I was trying to trick people or dupe them, I wouldn't want to do that, even if that wasn't my intent. And so I hope, he sees this and is like, maybe I got to change my style, but maybe I'm being too optimistic. I don't know.
When I say duty you would have to exist, or you'd have to admit is also real then as a concept.
What do you mean by duty?
Obligations that you have absent entitlements. And I would classify rights as being entitlements you have absent obligations.
So you said a duty is an obligation absent an entitlement?
Yeah.
And then you said that, what was the second?
That for a right, it would be an entitlement absent a duty.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't actually see any duties women have in modernity. None. Like no actual duties.
Duties to what?
This part might get a little bit less interesting. We just talk about like feminism stuff. But he does do a weird thing where he talks about like materialism being the fact that like things are self-fulfilling. And then he seems to start switching that back and forth between relativism. So I don't know how much of this you want to watch, but that's up to you.
I'll give it a listen. I'm curious. Yeah, I can't only do meta ethics, and it's tangentially related, so why not?
Hey, that's fine with me. Okay, cool.
All right, so I want to be vigilant enough. So let me roll it back a few seconds just to make sure that I'm.
What was the second?
That for a right, it would be an entitlement absent a duty.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't actually see any duties women have in modernity. None. Like no actual duties.
Duties to what?
Anything.
You don't like in a moral sense or?
No, in any sense. So I see a lot of entitlements, rights, entitlements absent duty. So you have the right to vote, no duty to vote, right to own a gun, no duty to own a gun, right? You have the right to incriminate or not incriminate yourself, but no duty to incriminate yourself or not to incriminate yourself, right? Every one of these rights is an entitlement. There's no duty which comes along with it. So I think that in a time before feminism, let's say, especially the 1900s, that instead of women and men in this case moving towards a materialistic outlook, they focused a lot more on duties instead of entitlements themselves. And I think that has been very bad for society, the focus on materialism from feminism.
Okay, maybe just to get more clear on that term duty, being an obligation absent entitlement. What you're saying is that, somebody should act or needs to act, right, without being given anything to act?
No, they could be given orders to act. That could be considered a duty.
Not what I'm saying. Okay, maybe there was some miscommunication there, but something that, you should do whether or not you're rewarded for it or something like that. Is that something like what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. So something,
some obligation to do, some obligation absent entitlement to perform X action.
okay.
Now, that's not a perfect definition, but I think it's like a workable one for the purpose of the conversation.
Okay, so you think that, women don't have any duties, but they do have.
But I think men do. I think men have duties.
So I'm a little confused by this at this point, and I had watched this before, and I don't remember exactly how you end up responding. When he says you have, I assumed he was implying that women don't have duties that are distinctive to women, that women have them, but men don't. But if he's saying women don't have any duties at all, like the response I would immediately have is like a duty to like serve on jury duty, and like there's like things you can have duties, and you even ask in a moral sense, and he said not just in a moral sense, any sense, and it's like, well, isn't that a duty? Or if you have children, to take care of your children, if you have elderly family members, to take care of them, or if you have disabled people, to take care of people that have special needs. There's like all kinds of duties that you could have based on the relationships you have to other people. Is he saying that women don't have those duties?
Yeah, I don't know what I think he's doing something weird with the word duty there. And that's why I tried to get really clear. And I go back and I ask him one more time, and I'm like, okay, can we like just reiterate like what do you mean by this? Because if I'm talking about a duty, obviously I'm not some like deontologist. I don't, I don't subscribe to anything like that. So if you're saying that there's some like duties that you think that they should have, that they don't, that for some reason maybe men do, unequally or something like that, then we can talk about that. And he gets into the draft, but it takes him a really long time to get there just to say like, hey, yeah, I'm talking about the draft. Like, obviously, women are equally legally obligated to care for their kids as men are. In fact, I think there might be skewed a little bit more towards like women having more obligations to care for their children, but I could be wrong. There's equal obligation to like vote. I think morally people should vote because I think people have political agendas, and I think that they should progress those political agendas and do what they think is good for society. There's tons of things that both men and women are obligated to. But if there's something unequal there, like I wish I would have just said, actually, I think all of men, and women have equal moral obligations. And I think they have mostly equal legal obligations. And then if you think that there's anything unequal there, we can talk about that. I wish I would have just done that and said, okay, which ones, are unequal?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's so easy to look back in a conversation and think, I wish I would have said this. What's that? I always forget that phrase. There's the phrase of, it's like, isn't it like French or something? Like the phrase of like, when you realize what you wanted to say when you're like walking down the stairs after you leave the conversation, there's like a certain phrase for it. Someone in the chat always reminds me, and then I promptly forget every single time. But there's some word for that. All right. Okay, so I'm cool with continuing to go with this because I think it's interesting. And if you have stuff to say on it and I don't, then I just won't say much more about it. All right.
Or if you're making some sort of like prescriptive claim.
Descriptive.
Descriptive? Okay, so you think that men have duties and women don't?
Yes.
And that you think that women have rights and men don't have rights, or they do?
I think that women have more rights than men do. So this would come down to my argument for conscription. It's very simple. Men have a duty and obligation to sign up for the draft. Women have no such obligation or duty to do so, but women can still vote to send men to wars and then not fight in them because they can't be drafted. So I would consider that to be an extra right that women have that men do not have, because they are they actually have to sign up and be conscripted during wartime.
Okay, sure.
And absent wartime.
Okay, so this is argument feminism bad because men have to go to the draft and women don't, and they both get the right to vote?
No, this is an argument for materialism. I'm just expressing that when we moved away from a duty-based society for women, I can't think of any actual obligations that women have as far as duties to society, but I can think of actual
I think I would have asked him, what duties does he think women used to have? And again, you did clarify that it's descriptive, like, so not prescriptive. Right. What duties does he think women used to have? Like what society expected them to do that they don't have anymore?
Yeah, he's a very, I don't know how much you know about him. He's a very like traditional Christian, I believe Catholic man. And a lot of what he talks about is how he thinks like the traditional family should be implemented, whatever that means, however that plans, he plans to play that out.
Mhm.
But yeah, so there might be something like that where like women have a duty to be caretakers for society, to be housewives. I don't know exactly everything that entails, but
Okay. Yeah, I do wonder about that. Just, speaking about like human history and anthropology, like, is it
Mhm.
in fact the case, historically speaking, that women in all societies, like this idea, like the nuclear family, how is that what every society was like? Because I don't have the impression that that is in fact the standards family structure of like, I don't know, indigenous societies 50,000 years ago. Like there would have been like potentially polyamory in some of these societies, or children
right.
raised by people other than the mother and father, so they're raised both by other children and by like grandparents and uncles and aunts and nephews and nieces, and there would be a very different type of family structure than we have in like this like idyllic conception of the American 1950s of families living in
Yeah.
a specific house separated from the rest of their extended family. That seems like a rather recent aberration in the traditional family structure. Am I wrong about that? I don't know enough about the history of human family structures.
No, that's pretty accurate. Actually, it's kind of weird because I don't know much about like biblical or the family structures that existed during biblical times. Which, if he's a Christian, I would think that that's what he wants to emulate. I would think that like that's the goal, whatever that was at that point. But yeah, no, that happened this like hyper individualization happened like post industrial revolution. Like that stemmed from the industrial revolution. So that's not like typical of human history at all. Like you can look at other family structures and like statistically Hispanic families will have more interdependent relationships versus independent relationships. And that's why you see Hispanic families with like, a grandmother and a mother and these children who all live in the same house. So whatever he's talking about isn't the traditional family structure for Hispanic people. It's not the traditional family structure for people in Europe. It's a very new development in family structure in the United States. So I don't know where he got this from as like the ideal.
Yeah, I would want to know, maybe this is if I ever talk to him, is to ask like, what is the ideal family structure? Because I would imagine that in many societies, it would be typical for grandparents to live in the house, for cousins of various kinds, that often the groups would be largely clan based or very close kinship based, where there would be cousins of all sorts and nephews and uncles and aunts and people that are all fairly closely related, living in extremely close proximity and sharing parental duties, sharing various sorts of caregiving responsibilities. And then it would not be this very linear parent-child and very atomized. Like it's a relatively
Yeah.
recent thing, as far as I know, for people. Like, okay, like right now, I live with my wife, and like we don't live near our families, so our families are like very, very far away. I can't go get in the car and go see them. That is extremely atypical of the course of human history, and it's not just atypical; it's like radically atypical.
Yeah.
It is very, very strange for me to not be anywhere near any of my cousins, I don't have any of my siblings anywhere near me. That's weird.
Yeah.
And yeah, there seems to be this idea that the ideal family structure, not that he specifically said this, so this is general commentary. When people talk about motherly duties or fatherly duties, is there often seems to be this very narrow conception of what the family ought to be like that seems very historically anachronistic and very out of alignment with human evolution and human social structures more generally.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree completely. And it's weird because he does this thing near the end where he makes a claim about like monogamy or men preferring women with like lower body counts being something that like could be possibly due to like an evolutionary background. And he actually mentions evolutionary psychology, which he dogs on psychology the entire time, which is really frustrating. But I'm like, you picked not only are you like leaning on psychology for this theory you have about like why men prefer types of women or something like that, you're leaning on like the most contentious form of psychology pretty
Right.
much. Like you picked the one that's like most up for debate.
Yeah, I like that way of phrasing it, because some people, I think, are aggressively dismissive of evolutionary approaches to psychology, which I'm not. But I also think that
Yeah.
they need to be taken with extreme caution. I mean, we're probably both on the same page about it being very, very difficult. Like it's pretty easy to float an evolutionary hypothesis about why a human
Yeah.
behavior has emerged or is exhibited. It's much more difficult to provide empirical evidence that it's a result of any particular set of selection pressures. Would we agree about that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't think we would disagree about that, but I guess it's an important thing just to be clear on. And then the other is just it's really funny when psychologists make the mistake of observing some human behavior, assuming incorrectly that it's universal, and then offering some evolutionary hypothesis, and then it just turns out to be some cultural quirk of some culture they happen to be in.
Yeah, it's definitely also like a sampling bias on his part, obviously, because like you look at other cultures and they have like polygamous households and like there's multiple wives and multiple husbands and all in the same family. And that's just yeah, his notion of like this nuclear family or traditional family is very skewed by like Western ideals.
Yeah, I don't know enough about what his religious perspective is, because, for some people that have a religious background, they may think that certain kinds of family structures were ordained by God or are more reflective of some way society initially started out. And they may see what we're talking about here as deviations from that ideal.
Yeah, I think that that's probably accurate.
Hard to say without having more specific information. Does that come up before or after this at all? Like what he thinks about family structures, or are we just speculating here?
He does kind of talk a little bit about like he compares the traditional family to what he calls alternative families, and come to like do a little bit digging. All he's talking about is like same-sex families, so like a same-sex parent household. And he calls like any acceptance of that like propaganda, which irks me in a little bit of a way. But yeah, I suspect that what he's talking about is just heterosexual parent households. What else that consists of? I'm guessing Christianity, but then he doesn't go much into it.
Okay. All right, let's keep going.
Obligations that men do have still as a duty to society. And so it seems that women themselves actually have more rights in modern society than men do. And also, right, that a lot of this movement towards the idea of more additional rights comes from materialism itself. Everything seems to staunchly revolve around I want, me, I want, because it feels good.
Okay. Sure. I'm not sure. Maybe we could get more clear on materialism there. I'm not for the draft. I am for people voting. I think people should vote. So if you're making descriptive claims about like, okay, well, you think that this move towards materialism, and I'm thinking maybe you're talking about like Marxist materialism, or do you mean something totally do you mean materialism in a totally different field?
Yeah. In this case, very simple, right? I'm just using materialism in the sense of stuff in the replacement for something that is not stuff. Like, for instance, if we're talking about concepts of God, of country, of nation, of state, things like that, which could be fulfilling, and materialism would be the idea that like stuff can be fulfilling, like actual material goods, things like this can be a form of fulfillment.
Okay, so materialism, from what you're defining, is that material goods can be fulfilling.
Yeah.
Okay, this has to do what with feminism?
That what feminism has done is move women more towards materialism than duties. Duties would be this idea of the conceptualization of I ought to do things outside of because it feels good, whereas materialism is I'm going to get this stuff because it feels good.
Right. I mean, I can think that people should do things because I think should vote because I think that helps them pursue their political goals more. And I think that people enjoy freedom. I think that's good for people's well-being, is to have personal freedoms.
Doesn't seem to be.
Okay.
It seems to be that limiting people's personal freedoms is pretty good for their well-being.
Well, it seems, okay. Well, in some senses you would agree with that. In some senses you wouldn't, I assume.
Yeah, in some. There you can make delineation thresholds, but everybody voting has been a disaster. It's been terrible.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that by everybody being able to collectively vote rather than people at stake in the system, what's been able to happen is that the treasury has been able to be robbed by the collective power of the vote. So what happens is politicians end up creating blocks, voting blocks. They pit the voting blocks against each other. And these various blocks are trying to raid the treasury essentially for their own personal agendas. Every single block that I can think of, in fact, is trying to raid the treasury based on an agenda.
Right, but presumably you think some of those agendas are good, and two, you think that generally there's also good outcomes from everybody voting, right?
No, there's generally not good outcomes from everybody voting.
There's not a single good outcome,
I
or
didn't say there's not a single good outcome. I'd
Well, that's a
never put it
question.
in a monolith,
that's
but
a question.
I just answered the question.
Oh, did you want to pause there?
Yeah. Oh gosh, there's so much that he said there. It's just like a headache. My goal here was like, let me just get some like common ground laid out and see like what starts to be contentious, and then we can like build up to those other concepts of like, okay, who should be able to vote, which I think is like really weird that that's contentious, but that's fine. But I kind of just start because he's a conservative. I think he considers himself a libertarian, and if you know anything about politics and political affiliation, libertarians are big on personal freedom. They're big on keep the government out of my stuff. I want small government. I want personal, I want personal liberties. So that was my appeal there, was like, hey, you think, personal liberties are good generally. And I'm not asking him, is personal liberty good in every case? But for some reason, he still disagrees with that. He still goes like, I don't know if personal freedoms are generally a good thing. And I'm like, isn't that like your whole political party's like thing? Like, isn't that like your whole worldview is that like we should protect individual freedoms?
Yeah, I do wonder if he might be able to say more here. Maybe he thinks people should have personal freedom within the framework of relatively tight moral norms that restrict those freedoms in certain respects. I don't know. I don't know without getting into the details.
Yeah, I wish I would have asked him. So, like, do you think that we should restrict some people's right to vote based on this? Like, you said that it's been bad that they've voted, people have had the choice to vote. So should we just take away people's right to vote because you don't like it?
Yeah, it sounded like he said his issue was people not having a stake. So maybe he like, if I had to guess, and maybe I have some dim recollection of him saying something later, but like property owners get to vote, like people that don't own property don't get to vote. That would be one criterion I could imagine him using.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I don't know.
There would be a few different points that could go down. I mean, I could bring up something like the veil of ignorance. Like, okay, well, what would you do had you not known who you were going to be, that you were going to be, a straight white man who owns a podcast or something like that? Would you want to make a world where you got like equal rights to vote? Of course you want stake in the game. You want to be able to, have your opinion heard regardless of like whether you own property or not, or whether or not, you benefit from some other way in the system. Like it was a very weird thing for him to give pushback on, to say like, no, generally it's not good that people have personal freedoms. And I go into this and I give him like ostensive examples, like, hey, you wake up in the morning and you breathe every morning. That is a personal freedom. Like no one's restricting your right to do that. And he does actually push back on that. And he goes, oh, well, that's not a right. So it gets more into that right talk after that. But
yeah, I'm just wondering what a steel man would look like. And, drawing on ideas in psychology, you can point to things like if people have, for instance, if you go to a restaurant or you're buying some other product, if you have too many options, people could get decision paralysis and buyer's remorse. And so it's like it wouldn't be good if stores only had one version of each product. You get no leeway. Like you go to the movie theater, they play one movie. You go to the store, there's one type of milk. There's whole milk. And if you don't like that, too bad. Giving people options is good. But arguably, if they had 73 different kinds of milk, there's like 1%, 1.1%, 1.2%. People would be sitting there going, and like every type of like, there's cashew milk and whatever kind of milk, pea milk, that people would be sitting there going like, I have no idea. So there is that. Is that possibly what he's talking about? That giving people too many options or having too liberal of a society in terms of what you can do would be bad for people?
I am assuming that his conclusion is something like everyone has gotten to vote, and the outcomes from that are things that I don't like, which is weird because that's very subjectivist language. That's very like, we should do this because I like it, or we should not do this because I don't like it. So I suspect that that's what's happening. Is he's saying like, well, everyone has gotten to vote and now there's less nuclear families, or everyone has gotten to vote and now women who, women are pursuing their own personal gains now. And I don't like that. And I think that they should do XYZ differently or something like that. I suspect that that's something like the goal of what he's doing here.
Is it possibly he means something like, I'm trying to steelman just because why not? But like, what if he said something like this? No, I'm not arguing that it's because I don't like it. It's because it's not good for them.
Oh, I would just need to, I would want to know what he means by that. Like, what do you mean it's not good for them? You mean like they won't like it? Or you mean like something bad in a non-mind dependent way will happen to them if they do this? Or, I would have to parse that out.
Yeah, I mean, there would be a realist and an anti-realist way of construing that. But like, one thing someone could argue is that giving everybody to the right to vote has not had good consequences relative to the standards of those people. I doubt he would say that because I don't think he likes relativism very much. But I would wonder what the argument for that would look like. Would it be something like restricted voting leads to better overall consequences with respect to like general human well-being? And if so, I would be curious what that would be based on. If that was the claim. So I don't think he's making that claim, but I don't know what that would look like. I mean, there are people that have been critical of various aspects of democracy. I don't know if you've looked into any of that stuff.
A little bit-ish, yeah.
Yeah, so like, have you seen Jason Brennan has a book called Against Democracy?
No, I haven't read that.
Yeah, it's interesting because he and a couple other people have written books basically arguing that the typical voter is too uninformed for their votes to be in their like, basically their votes aren't particularly good by some set of standards or criteria they could provide because people are just not very well informed. And some of that, I don't know exactly what I think Brennan advocates this. I think a few other people do. It's like epistocracy, like ruled by people that are better informed, or voting rights based on people that are better informed in this particular case.
Interesting. That might actually skew the argument away from his favor then, because I think like 60% of like bachelor's degree holders are women. So that would mean if he wants something like women shouldn't vote, they should just be house caretakers, whatever. Well, 60% of them are the ones who have, like degrees. So they're more likely to be educated, at least on some form of politics or government or something like that. So that's actually, that might be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose it would depend on what standards we're using for that. But, if he intended to articulate something like that, I'm supposing he would have. So,
yeah, he definitely didn't get that across. Yeah, if that's what he meant.
All right. This has got to get back to meta ethics at some point. I feel like we're into this and there hasn't been that much meta ethics yet. It's been hinted at.
Yeah.
But that's okay. All right. Anything else to say there?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Question. I would not say that there's never a single good outcome.
Right. So you just happen to believe that the good outcomes don't outweigh the bad outcomes.
Well, yeah, that's how I would weigh anything when it came to the political process, right?
Right. So, okay. I mean, we can just take, for example, you think that it's generally good, just prima facie good to protect individual freedoms, right? Like
to a degree.
Well, I think I can probably give you infinitely many cases where you would say it's good to protect infinite.
I think I can give you
personal
infinitely
freedoms.
many cases in the opposition where you would think it was really good to limit them.
Probably not in the real world. Like I can take, for example, you waking up and breathing this morning. That's a right that's a personal freedom that should be protected.
Me waking up and owning a machine gun, is that a personal right that should be protected?
That's going to hinge on like an epistem, like that's going to be some like empirical claim that I don't.
It's not an empirical claim.
Like whether or not you.
What do you mean?
No, whether or not I think that that's a right that should be protected is going to hinge on empirical data. So whether or not that causes more bad outcomes.
Can I own a nuke?
I think probably there would be really bad outcomes if you own a nuke.
Probably. So you'd want to limit that, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's still an empirical issue though. Like if it happened to be it's very contingent. So if we lived in a world where no one was able to actually launch any nukes because, I don't know, super AI overlords would just take them out of the air and disarm them immediately, then you can have a big bunker of nukes in your closet and it wouldn't matter. So whether it would be good or bad would be based on consequences, and then the actual consequences that would occur in any given instance in which you implemented that kind of, or like enacted a right to have them or not, would be based on expected consequences, which would be based on empirical considerations. So
Yeah, I don't suspect that he thinks that there's some like moral fact about owning nukes, like that they
Yeah,
like
it's like a
regardless of like,
deontological fact.
yeah, there's some deontological fact about owning nukes, I guess.
But a person could think that. They could think that there is a moral duty not to own things of great destructive potential independent of their expected consequences. You could think that,
Yeah.
but it seems like he's leaning in the direction of like, if you think that the answer is obvious to a question, that it's not empirical, like empirical considerations are only for things that are contentious, that you can't figure it out from the armchair. Because like, I haven't done an empirical test about what would happen if you launched me into the sun. I'm pretty sure I would die, and I don't think I need to test that to find out.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so it seems like he's not understanding what you mean by that being an empirical issue, and seems to be scoffing at that, but he really shouldn't be scoffing at that.
There's a few points where he not only understands what I think I'm saying there, because I think I ask him something later on, and he goes the whole conversation without telling me he doesn't know what a word means that I used, which is really frustrating because I'm like, I wish he would have just asked. I ask every time I don't know what words he's using are. But yeah, that kind of thing just continues where he doesn't understand like statistics or data or what data is relevant for, all sorts of things.
All right, I forgot I didn't have the purple light on, so I just turned it on now. Now I feel bad. That's a whole hour of no purple light.
Oh no.
Sorry, that's very irrelevant, but it was distracting me. But yeah, if you don't know what something means, you should ask for clarification. He also does take notes and ask at other points, so it's a little unfortunate that he wouldn't ask.
Yeah.
So I feel like we're racking up a list of random grievances that are barely even forming any principled whole. It's just, here's another thing he does that I'm not fond of.
Yeah.
I guess I'm wondering why are we doing this? Is it just catharsis?
I think so, probably. I think it's just like for me personally, I'm just trying to understand like what he's doing. Like half the time I'm like, what is he talking about? What's his intentions here? Like my psychology brain is going off.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me. So I'm cool with it. All right, let's keep going.
Cool.
What about a battleship with like Uzis strapped to it that did a like 360 turnstile, just mowing everything down? I should probably not have that either, right? Or hand grenades.
Right. And those are instances that we don't currently have. I'm talking about literally from you breathing to you sitting at the table to you holding a pen to you wearing a shirt to you being in the studio to being in America. Oh, sorry. To you being able to drink water. All of those things are personal freedoms. And you believe that all of those things should be protected. And there's probably less of those like insane scenarios than...
Breathing's not a right. What do you mean? You don't have a right to breathe. It's a function of what you do.
You have
There's
a right
not
to
an empirical right to it.
Right, but you have a right to life, and stopping you from breathing.
Do you have a right to life, or do you have a concept that you have a right to life?
Yeah, the right is the concept.
The concept,
remember?
yeah. So the idea here is that
why that callback? That's frustrating. I just want to acknowledge Nitty, who just threw $10. I guess my way. I don't know how it works since we're both streaming to our channels, but thank you, Nitty. And I guess so. Nitty just says dunk away. So I guess we'll keep doing that.
Yeah, I don't know why he brings up the right stuff again. Because what was his definition? It was something like a right is like an entitlement or something, absent an obligation. So like you do have the right to breathe. Under his definition, you have the right to breathe. That is a right. You have the right to life, and you don't have to do anything to maintain that right. So I don't know what his pushback here is actually.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe part of the callback part where he's just like questioning whether they're real or not is intended as a joke.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe it is a meme and I'm falling for it.
Okay, this is just a very random thing, but I'm noticing that green thing in the background, and it looks like it's there was the show on Nickelodeon in the 90s where it was like a competition where everyone would have to like climb this mountain, and there was like green, like crystal stuff, like fake crystal.
Oh my gosh. I don't know. I did notice that in the studio. I actually don't know what that is at all. They have a bunch of weird like gadget things around.
Yeah, it's just bringing back a memory that might be from 30 years ago, which is just making me feel very old. But I know there was a show. I can't remember what it was called. And like they would have like styrofoam rocks fall down people's face while they were climbing. Someone's got to know. So we got to have some people my age in here that know what I'm talking about. Okay, sorry, that was very random.
No, you're fine.
All right, cool. Okay, so sorry, I got so distracted. I'm easily distracted, so that was very distracting. What were we
No
talking
worries.
about?
We were talking about him bringing it back to the rights thing when
Oh,
the right to breathe does fit under his definition. He believes that you have the right to breathe, but he still contends with it for some reason.
yeah, I do find that a little strange. Maybe it's standing out to him. Look, I feel like I'm being too charitable, but is that okay? Like, I feel like if you're going to critique him, maybe I should be the charitable devil's charitable person.
It's like
I don't know.
good cop, bad cop. Like you can be the good cop, be super charitable to him. I probably will be a little bit less charitable to him.
I still feel like I'm being critical, but whatever. The audience can decide. Okay, so if you say something like a right to breathe, that can sound strange to someone because it's not the typical thing you would include in like a list of rights, like a right to free speech or something like that. Because it'd be a little weird to say like I have a right to go to the bathroom, or like a right to, I don't know, sleep, because it doesn't sound like a typical thing you would include on a list of rights. So it might just sound strange, and then that could prompt someone to think, well, that's not really a right. That's something else. I don't know. But if it formally meets the description of a right, then I don't see what the issue should be. But yeah, this is something I do notice with people. If you give them examples of things that sound like, quote unquote, extreme or strange, they won't accept them as cases of the thing in question. So that might have something to do with the way people think about categories. Like, I think people would find it like if I ask people to give an example of a bird, they're going to say like a robin or a pigeon or something. And if I immediately go with like pelican or flamingo or something like that, it's going to puffin. It's going to stand out to people as strange. They're going to be like, ugh. It's going to be a little jarring. So when you give examples of things that are like outliers within the respective domain, that might spark people to think that you're up to something, and then they might find that objectionable.
Yeah, there's pretty cool research in cognitive psych about that, where people's like concept formations, sometimes it takes them a little bit longer if something's not like a prototype of like a schema that they have. It'll take them longer to recognize that thing as part of the schema. So yeah, I mean that's probably what's happening here.
Yeah, maybe, but there could be other things going on. So I think so. You got the cognitive stuff going on, and that's part of what I was alluding to. But then there's also someone for social reasons could think that you're up to something suspicious if you choose outliers, and then reflexively reject it. And then third is that they may think if the thing is sufficiently outside of the paradigmatic cases, it's not like look, we've all been around long enough to like know flamingos are birds, even if they're kind of weird looking birds, or that penguins are birds, even though they don't fly, or ostriches are birds. But if you think of paradigmatic rights, it's not like, someone goes, look, technically, all these sorts of basic things that we do every day, technically that we have a right to do those things. So that's just not something people have had experience considering. So there's also the fact that it's a little different than the bird cases.
Yeah.
Or maybe he just hasn't fully fleshed out his conception of a right, and it's more restrictive than what you had supposed. Who knows?
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
The concept. Yeah, I'm not sure that people have a right to life. Like if you steal my TV, I don't think you have a right to life.
Well, sure, those rights can be overridden. Those are overriding
because they don't exist. That's why they did.
Yeah, see, it's not because they don't exist. I mean, your point here is just that you could have a right, and then the right could get taken away. It doesn't mean you don't have the right, and that has nothing to do with whether they're concepts or they're material.
Yeah, like you had the right before it got taken away. Like otherwise, it would have just been fine to like kill you before. Like before you had even done anything wrong, it would have been fine to just kill you. Like.
Yeah, like presumably he thinks people should be put in prison for various sorts of crimes, and then they lose a lot of those rights. Does that mean that they don't have those? Yeah, so like, sorry, I think it froze again.
You're good.
People get put in, presumably he thinks people go to prison, and then when he thinks people should go to prison, and when a person goes to prison, they lose the ability to exercise many of the rights that they would exercise if they were not in prison. The way he's speaking here would seem to imply that anything that you can't do in prison, you don't have a right to at all in the first place. Yeah. Like if the right can get taken away, it means you don't have the right in the first place. So people don't have a right to like walk down the street. They don't have a right to, well, you could lose your voting right. So you don't actually have a right to vote because you might lose it. So like, is he implying any right that could be overridden or taken away is not really a right?
Yeah, I would think that that's what like the natural entailment there is.
That I struggle to believe that he would believe that on reflection.
Yeah. No, I agree.
There's not really anything. So the concept here, right, it can be overridden and changed because the concept itself is flawed. The idea of rights themselves are flawed. So when you're talking about your like First Amendment right or something like this, when you talk about freedoms in general, yeah, I think that we have all sorts of duties which override those rights all the time.
Right. So, but you have to make the case that this is one of those instances where you should override somebody's rights. So when
since
you say,
women
well,
started voting,
hold on, don't interrupt me. That's
you just told me to give the answer.
very impolite. Very impolite.
Do you think that I'm the only one?
But look, so you think that there's all of these instances where like you shouldn't have your right to breathe infringed upon, you shouldn't have your right to XYZ. That doesn't mean that those things aren't real just because they can be overridden. I don't know what the argument for that would be. So the concepts themselves, right? These things are changeable concepts, right? Yeah,
all of them are changeable.
The concept itself is.
And where does the concept exist? Does it exist in all brains or does it exist in one brain?
Well, I think that people have different concepts of rights. But
Right.
What I am saying, though, is when people say, I have a right to life, they're not saying, I have a right to life in every single imaginable possible scenario. Do you know that?
Do you like know that like when you express things that...
Oh my gosh, and I was just going to mock you?
There might be, maybe on reflection, maybe the way that I said that to him came across as combative, and I think he was just responding to that naturally, being combative back. So I'm fine with like him doing that. I don't think it looks good on him, which I'm also fine with. Well, it might look good to like his audience, but it certainly doesn't look good to me. I didn't find that appealing at all, and I don't think anybody that I know that is respectable finds that appealing. But there's several times where I do this where I ask him like, do you know, like when I say this thing, like, do you understand what I'm saying here? When I use that word, do you understand what I mean? Just to make sure we're on the same page. And I think he gets defensive to it a lot, which is unfortunate because I'm just asking for clarification.
Yeah, it might have come off to him like if you say, do you know that? Like you're implying, like, are you some kind of idiot that doesn't even know this?
Yeah, which is what he does the whole time, but.
Right, like he says stuff that seems postury like that all the time. So why is he so reactive to you doing it arguably once, which like looking at this, it doesn't even look to me like you're doing that, but I could see how it could seem that way, but he seems to have such a bad reaction to it. It's a little ironic given, look, I'm trying to be charitable, but I gotta say, it's a little ironic for him to be defending the kind of worldview that he has. And he appears to be totally willing to dish it out, and he really doesn't seem to be able to take it for like 5 seconds.
Yeah, so. There's, and I point this out, and I'm not sure he ever really understood what I was saying here, but there's this thing where he goes, well, rights are changeable, and if you steal my TV, I can lock you up in prison, or I can call the police on you, and your rights will be taken away. And then when I tell him, well, yeah, of course, people, when they're talking about the right to life, they're not talking about, I just get to do whatever I want and I can still live, or I get to, which that's contentious, but maybe like I can do whatever I want and I still get to participate in society or something like that in every scenario. They're not saying that. And he self-admits that by the way that he talks about rights. He admits like, yeah, well, when people talk about rights, they're saying like, well, you can typically live, you can typically be free, but if you do something really bad, then you can't anymore. You don't have those things anymore. So he acknowledges that in the language he uses.
Yeah, you both appear to be on the same page about this, and yet he's trying to make a fuss about it by treating it as though you're like all you're talking about, and he seems to agree with this is, okay, so you have rights. Rights are these things you can exercise, you have a right to do this, you have a right to do that. But if you do certain sorts of really bad things, you take the rights away, as you've said. I think you both agree about that. But for whatever reason, he seems to be trying to bring this back to this irrelevant metaphysical distinction between whether rights are material or just concepts. And then because you think that different people can have different conceptions of a thing to which they use the same term to refer, or there could be different conceptions of a particular notion in a particular concept space. You didn't put it that way, but like different people could have different notions about what constitutes fair treatment or what constitutes a
Yeah.
just punishment. Okay, so because people can have different concepts, none of the concepts are real, or they're all like, these are, none of these considerations are relevant to what you were saying, which is to make the like fairly uncontroversial claim that rights can be overridden by other sorts of considerations, such as the actions that a person performs or other people's rights or something like that, which presumably he agrees with. So I don't understand why he's trying to turn this into some sort of problem that's distinctive to you, when if that's what's on the table, he should just be like, oh yeah, obviously.
Yeah, he makes this claim, and this is the last thing I'll say about this particular portion, but he makes the claim like, that's why the concept of rights is flawed. The concept itself is flawed because you have to change it when you need to. And I think that's actually very false. I think that's like a strength of the concept of rights, is that they adapt to the scenarios that we need them to, or that people do adapt them to the scenarios that they need them to. Because obviously, I mean, if I'm talking about like things that I value, or like rights that I want to be protected, obviously it's going to be a nice feature of the view if I can just adapt the right to whatever I want it to be. I mean, why would that be a flaw? It's not a flaw to me.
Yeah, no, well, I agree, but I do want to draw a distinction here. So there's a difference between whether the concept of rights itself is being changed, or whether one's concept of what rights are remains the same, but one's concept of like what the actual content of the rights you're going to implement on normative moral grounds or legal grounds or whatever they might be, those change. Think of it like rules in games have changed over the years. They don't have identical rules in American football or soccer or chess. There have been small modifications. Like, I don't know, chess is like en passant. I don't know that was always there. So rules of games have changed over time. That's a good thing. It's good that we're able to change the content of the rules of those games. And one could say the same thing for socially constructed systems of rights, that it's good that we could change rights over time. And we don't have this idea that not just that our concept of rights is fixed, but that the content of what those rights are remains fixed. So the content of the rights could be changeable, even if our concept of rights themselves remains fairly fixed. So which of those is he pointing to? It's not clear.
Yeah, no, I agree. It is pretty unclear.
It is frustrating to see a relatively long conversation, because I think this is about 15 minutes in, and it doesn't well, I mean, this is like an hour in for like in the video, but I mean 15 minutes of us of clips that we've watched. But it looks like it would take a lot more work for you to both be clear on what the other is trying to say.
I agree. Yeah. If I'm not sure if I go back, if I want to touch on this stuff again, I have other motives of maybe talking about like abortion or veganism, because I think those things are really important. But if it does get back into it, I at least have footnotes now of like, okay, hey, I need to, if he brings up meta ethics, be careful about what I say in this regard or respect or something like that.
Yeah, there's other stuff I want to ask you about, but I do want to get to the meta ethics stuff at some point. So it's really my fault for pausing this so many times, but I guess it's good to cover other interesting stuff. Okay, we ready to keep going?
All good.
Okay.
You should express them precisely so that I know exactly what it is that you do mean. So when you say,
sure.
when you say like, do you know when people say X, that what they actually mean is Y? It's like, no, I don't actually know that, because from what you're saying is when people say X, this is it. You just leave it on rights. That's what people say. And it's like, now you clarify and say, well, when people say X, they really don't always mean X. Like, fair enough. I can grant that that is true, but you didn't really make that case
You're not just
before.
granting that it's true, though. Here's what happened, though, is that you said that, well, there's instances where these rights can be overridden, right? So you do recognize that people, when they say you have the right to life, they aren't talking about the right to life in an absolute sense.
No. That's a pedantic way to look at my words. Maybe my words were sloppy there, right? It's just a way for me to categorize the words that you understand what I'm saying. So I could say override or something like this. If you want to pin me on it, I can use a different word. But the entire idea here, though, is that these are just concepts. Because they're just concepts, they're very changeable in the human experience as concepts. And they only exist in single brains. They don't exist in collective brains, right? They can't. Every single brain has to have some variation of this concept, right?
Sure, but people have general, agreements on what a concept means.
Sure.
So they can approximate as close as they can. But when somebody says, like I said, they have the right to life or they have the right to breathe, I would think that you know that they're not saying, and also just to reframe this, because you said it's like, oh, well, when people are saying they're X, you're saying they actually mean Y. No, I'm saying they mean something like X asterisk, to the right-hand corner.
So
or
actually
something
Y.
like that. That's not what I said. I think that's kind
well,
of
it can't be
dishonest.
X and not X. So it has to be X actually means not X.
Right, but it could be X with like an additional clause that's understood to be true. Like when you have conversations, there are things that you understand with people. Like there's social cues. Like
Yeah.
I think people typically understand
I agree.
rights aren't
I'm just
absolute.
making sure that if there's a meaningful distinction, we untangle the meaningful distinction. If there's not, we don't.
Sure. Okay. So when people talk about rights, I mean, because I guess we'll just get 100% clear on this now. When people talk about rights, they're typically not talking about some absolute, ability to do anything, some entitlement to do anything no matter what.
Okay, I agree.
Sure.
But I never thought that was in dispute. What was in dispute is the concepts themselves, right? So the idea is, well, I have a right to do X, and then somebody comes along and says, no, you don't, and puts a bullet in your head, right? Did he have the right, or did you have the right?
Did the person who put the bullet into somebody's head have a right to do that?
Yeah.
Not per the person who they did it to.
Right, exactly. So then these are just concepts. They're individual. They're mind-dependent concepts for individual minds themselves. They're not even collectivized.
Well, there can be rights that we agree upon.
Sure, you
Certainly
can
think that's
agree. You can agree to them, right? But you can't really say that when somebody else comes along and says, "But I have a right to violate your rights," that they don't have a right to do that. That's the problem with them, right?
They under your frame of rights, they don't have that. Per your standard, they don't have that right.
Yeah, but per their standard, they do.
Yeah, that's just trivially true. If you're just saying a right,
and trivial truths are true because they're true. So the thing is yes, it's trivially true that if a person says, well, I have the right to kill you, and you say you don't have the right to kill me, right? Mm-hmm. I just want to know who actually here has the right to do what.
So this is where I'm going to start to have an issue. Who actually has the right?
Oh my goodness. It's weird to say that when he's because he does this with the relativism thing too, where he goes well, what's actually good? If you're just saying, something's good, what's actually good though? And it's weird to say okay, well, we already established it's a concept. And then there's approximated versions of that concept in the people who live in a society's minds. So what do you mean? I wish I would have just been I wish I just would have asked him more questions or been able to ask him more questions. What do you mean who actually has the right? And just explain that.
Yeah, you could go that route, but I'm having an issue with this notion of, because this is, I guess, more my wheelhouse. So this use of the term actually. So I proposed a term for its use in contexts like these. I call them misleading modifiers, where when someone says actually, they're helping themselves to the presumption that some background set of assumptions that they have, often metaphysical assumptions, the way in which they are construing or thinking about things is the only legitimate sense, the only sense that would be actual, and that if you have some alternative conception of the nature of the things in question, it's somehow not actual. So,
yeah.
I've given examples like this. I have this allegory. It's kind of based on Jack and the Giant Beanstalk. You imagine someone walks up to you and they have a handful of beans and they say, look at these magic beans that I'm holding. Do you agree that I'm holding these magic beans? And if you're well, sure, I see that you have a handful of beans, but I don't think they're magical. The reaction that they might have is, wait, so you don't think I'm actually holding beans? And you're whoa, no, you are holding beans. And no, but the only sense in which these could actually be beans is if they are what I say they are. And I say they're magical beans. So you can either accept both that they're magical and that they're beans, or you're denying that I have any beans. And of course, that's ridiculous because two people you can both agree that there are beans there, but you disagree about whether they're magical or not. And so what often people will do is they'll embed their metaphysical presuppositions into some observable set of things that you both agree that you have. Some, let's say, there are institutionalized facts about the exercise of our rights. We both respect them. We both respect rights to private property, respect rights to life, that sort of thing. We agree we have them. You disagree about their nature. You don't think that they are backed by the metaphysical apparatus that he believes in. And so he takes that to mean that you don't actually think that there are such things. That's just imposing his metaphysical conception on to the things in question. It's very frustrating. And what's especially frustrating about it is that if you think about it this way, let's say I'm a moral relativist and I think all moral facts are facts about what are true relative to the standards of individuals. So I think facts are in a certain sense reducible to preferences. Well, since I think preferences are real, I do think moral facts are real. I think they actually exist. They actually exist as facts that are reducible to facts about the preferences of different individuals. So they're totally real, but they're not stance independently true. If I think that, and I think that there are no stance independent moral facts, then from a relativist perspective, what I could say is it's actually the relativist that thinks moral facts actually exist, and the realist that thinks moral facts don't actually exist because the thing that they think exists does not exist. And so from the relativist perspective, you could say, well, only I think facts actually exist. You don't think facts actually exist, like the moral facts. So you don't get to own the concept of actual. Like whether your view is actually the thing in question is the very matter of contention.
Right.
It's really weird for people to do this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I see this, and I've talked with a few people about this already. It frustrates me because it's a moral realist thing, and I suppose maybe now a moral, like a rights realist thing or something like that, which I still struggle with that weird concept of like rights being real. But yeah, no, it is something that they do. And the intention, well, I can posit intention, I guess. The intention there is to minimize the concept, to make it seem less important or make it have less weight to it. Because if it's not really real, well, then I can just write it off as the same thing as Spider-Man. Spider-Man's not really real. He doesn't hold any weight in the real world. Like he doesn't dictate what decisions we make or something like that. So then if, rights are the same thing as Spider-Man, then screw it. Rights aren't like important.
Yeah, no, I do agree on this point. I do think it, whether intended or not, it serves a rhetorical function of minimizing the practical relevance of the anti-realist view, even when that is itself also a matter of contention. I mean, it would be very weird, just to give comparisons to things that most of us probably would agree are socially constructed facts, to say money isn't really real because it's a socially constructed fact. And then to say, okay, well, if you think money isn't actually real, what practical implications follow from that? Does that mean that you think you don't owe people money or that they don't owe you money? Do you think you shouldn't use money when you go make purchases? No, you would still use money. Like, even if you think money isn't actually real, if that has no practical consequences for your behavior, then to go around saying it's not actually real is giving the misleading impression that you've minimized its practical relevance when you in fact have not done so. And so if you want to imply that you've undermined the practical relevance of moral considerations on an anti-realist, or in this case, perhaps distinctively a relativist view, you better bring receipts. And I doubt and it's not just him. I don't think any realists can do this. So the thing in question not being real, honestly, who gives a shit? Okay, it's not real. Still acting on it. What happens now? Who cares? So this notion of real either carries practical relevance, in which case I disagree that the lack of relativists having real moral truths, I don't accept that framing, but if we do accept it, either it doesn't actually have any practical relevance, or it arguably does, but then they can't actually show what that lack of practical relevance is. It's lose-lose for them. They're not going to win this dispute.
Yeah, no, I agree. That I like, I know you've talked to PKD. I like his thing about price realism. Like, there's if there's not like a stance independent price for a car or something, then prices don't really exist and you can't negotiate and you can't have any real world application about prices.
Yeah, think about how ridiculous that would be. And, to compare it for individual relativism, because, realists will say stuff like, well, if you're a relativist, then you can't have any objection to someone like stealing your wallet or punching you in the face. Oh, okay. So if you don't think there's objective facts about what food tastes good or bad, independent of your taste preferences, if you order a pizza and the waiter or waitress, whatever, brings out like a bucket of garbage, you have no justification for complaining. You should be indifferent to what you eat. So imagine how ridiculous it would be to say, unless you're a gastronomic realist, you ought to be indifferent to what you eat.
Right. And that'd be insane.
Right. So the only things that should matter to me are things that are not my preferences, like what my preferences don't actually matter. What the hell kind of universe would people be living in if they? So, realists like to say nobody lives like an anti-realist, but you could flip this and say, look, if it cuts that way, it cuts both ways. No realist lives like a realist. They live like anti-realists. Why is it that they seem to reliably act on their goal standards and values and to seem to prioritize these over other sorts of considerations? Kind of funny.
Yeah, you might know that there's some like objective fact about like, okay, well, if you eat too much ice cream, you're going to be fat. But if you really want ice cream, that's not going to stop you. Like, I don't, yeah, they definitely act like anti-realists.
Yeah, or I wouldn't even say that they act like. I might make that point as a rhetorical point to push back against them, but
Yeah.
I don't like those kinds of points. Like, I'd rather just argue directly for whether the views are right or wrong. But like, if they can use it against us, it's like, what's the stupid old phrase? Gooses and ganders. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. If it works against anti-realists, they can make the same point about realists. And I think this generally applies across the board. You know what's weird though? If you look at debates between realists and anti-realists, you almost never see anti-realists push back against realist rhetoric or against these bad arguments, because anti-realists frequently have access to symmetrical counter arguments and they just don't avail themselves of them. And I have no idea why. Anti-realists historically, both in the academic literature and in online debates, seem very weak and ill-prepared. They don't present the kinds of counter arguments that you easily have access to as an anti-realist. I don't know why. Do you have thoughts on that? It's pretty random, but
I'm not sure what the reason is. And I wonder if the rhetorical tactics have just been effective, because maybe people aren't good at like mirroring other people's arguments. Like they're not like, I find myself struggling with that too sometimes, where like I could have said something to Andrew like about, okay, well, if you think rights have to be material, then you don't think souls have rights. You think once you get to heaven, you don't have any rights for anything. Like whatever could just happen to you. So I didn't think of that in the moment. And I talked to somebody else and kind of had that discussion later on. And I was thinking, oh goodness, well, I could have said, this thing, I could have just mirrored it back to him. And I didn't in the moment. And I think that might just be because those rhetorical tactics are a lot of the times given very upfrontly. And I don't know, something about them just works in the moment, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be the sort of person that would have given that response, because it seems like a gotcha. It doesn't seem like a strong point to make, because there's going to be a way for someone that believes in immaterial souls to address that question, but it might be difficult to do so in a short span of time. And so it could make someone fumble. It can make them look stupid or bad. And that's why I tend to avoid actually leveraging symmetrical arguments as if I'm like, aha, gotcha. What's your response? I just explicitly engage in a kind of meta discussion where I'm like, look, I could do this if I wanted to, but I'm not. I'm not going to do that. So what part of my dialectical objective is to sort of defang the case for realism. Realism, I think, enjoys almost all of its superiority dialectically on framing the conversation in a way that makes anti-realists not just look confused or mistaken, but evil and like bad people. And anti-realists need to push back against that. Anyway, I'm going on this tirade. I don't need to.
No, I just was going to agree with you, because I think there's probably also something like pro-social happening on the anti-realist side, because it's really easy to come across as like a good person and like a socially desirable person if you have like this moral high ground to stand on. And when you try to make anti-realist points in response, maybe there's something there that people are hesitant about, where they're like, well, if I don't say that there's something stands independently wrong about, like, I don't know, kicking puppies, I might come across as a really bad person. So I'm less inclined to maybe like push back on that or something. I don't know.
Yeah. But, anti-realists do have a response to this, which is to say, I'm so against like kicking puppies that I would be against it even if there was an objective fact mandating that I had to. So that's a thing that they could say. They could say, look, I'm more against puppy kicking than you are.
Yeah.
Why don't they say that? It might even be true.
Yeah, right. That is a good point. I think about that a lot with people who are like Christians, when they're like, oh, well, anything that God says goes. And I'm like, really now? And they usually have some like way around this where they talk about, well, it's not in God's nature to tell you to do really bad things or whatever. But I think a lot of the times people are just like going off of their own vibes. I don't think people are thinking, like, when Andrew goes to the store and he makes a purchase for something, or if he goes out into public, he doesn't think about like, what are the like biblical moral facts about taking my kids to the park? What are the biblical moral facts about eating a specific thing? He just does it, and he does what he thinks is right in the moment.
Yeah, this is part of what I'm alluding to when I say that I think people act like anti-realists. what I'm alluding to is that I think that what's actually happening, like if we could crack open people's minds and see exactly what's causing their behavior, I think people have personal values and preferences. They act on them. And then in the case of realists, what they do is they project those standards and values onto their conception of what the contents of the stance-independent moral facts are. Now, what some of them will say is that's not true because there's things I think I'm morally obligated to do that I don't want to do. So for instance, someone may have made a promise to someone to go to their wedding, and then they really don't want to have to buy that plane ticket and go to that wedding and deal with those annoying in-laws or whatever it might be. But the thing is, if that person goes ahead and does that, I don't think that they're doing something that they don't really want to do. I think that there's a thing they want to do, which is keep their promises. And then there's a thing that they don't want to do, which is deal face-to-face with an annoying in-law or sit in a plane for 12 hours, which is very unpleasant or whatever. They weigh the two against one another, and the former is more important to them relative to their values. So I actually think that they are just acting on their personal preferences. And I don't buy the psychological claim they have, which is I feel obligated to do it, but I don't want to do it. No, I don't think so. I think they want to do it. That I could be wrong about that, but I at least think that psychologically speaking, it's a contender on the table that everybody always acts on their own values and preferences, and that realists are just projecting, and all of the contents of the moral facts are just what they prefer. Yeah. No, I agree. Absolutely. Even if it's not all of it, I think it's at least it's bad on the freezing today. It's at least most of it. Okay. And I do wonder why realists are, I mean, I don't have to wonder too much, but they seem very opposed to that suggestion. Yeah, I think there's like a, well, if it's just, because a lot of the times I think people use the word like opinion to minimize something. So like people don't want to admit that it is just their opinion, that it is just something that like they care about, because it makes it seem like less important. Then if I can say like, no, there's like some, you know, metaphysically ooey gooey stuff going on here, and I just like have no choice but to adhere to like the good stuff. All right. Let me take us back a bit because it's been a while since we were listening to this. I want to remember the context.
If you're just saying like
trivial truths are true because they're true. So the thing is like, yes, it's trivially true, just meaning it's true that if a person says, well, I have the right to kill you, and you say you don't have the right to kill me, right? Mm-hmm. I just want to know who actually here has the right to do what? Actually has the right? Yeah. What do you mean by that? Who here actually has the right to do something? Who here?
I just got to say, that's such, I know we're back right where we started. You ask what he means by actually, and then he says actually. He just repeats it. Yeah. Very frustrating.
Actually can actually.
Question is, who has the ability to do what they want to do? Mm-hmm. Well, obviously the person.
Wait, what does that have to do with actually? Actually and actualize are different things.
Yeah, he equivocates here. And I've heard people run this exact same argument where they do the exact same thing.
Yeah, because like actually can mean something like it's true stance independently, but to actualize a right means like in practice the ability to enforce the right. Those are completely different concepts. Did he just pattern match like the word actual and actualize and just conflate the two just because they sound similar?
I genuinely think so. I do think that that's what happened.
Okay, well, look, I'm playing the good cop, but that's a pretty embarrassing mistake, and that's what it looks like. So,
who here actually can actualize this right? I just want to know who actually here has the right to do what?
Actually has the right?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Who here actually has the right to do something? Who here actually can actualize this right?
Actually can actualize. So if you actually have the right, and then you can actually actualize the right. The former sounds like he's saying which right is like stance independently correct, like which ones do we in fact have independent of our personal positions, and then the second sounds like who could in fact enforce the right. And then when you say, does he mean the latter? He goes, yeah, I mean the latter. So then he just forgot what he asked initially, which is about stance independence, presumably. Did he forget his own question?
Yeah, like the whole conversation has been about like, okay, are they real? Okay, now we're past that weird stuff about them being real versus not real. Now, like, okay, well, are they actually real? But what I mean by actually real this time is, I mean, like, who can enforce them? Well, the person who has the amount of force that's needed to can enforce them. What do you mean?
Right, which is just a trivial descriptive fact. Obviously, those who can enforce them are those who can enforce them. Like, what else is there to say?
Yeah, I note that, or later, where I'm like, yeah, it's just like the person who can. You're not saying anything interesting. That's just descriptive. Like, who cares? Okay.
My genuine impression here is that he used the wrong word when he said actualize. Then he just was like, fuck it, and ran with it. Like he just decided to change topics mid-sentence. But what's weird about it is it's one thing because people will say that person's not tracking, and that's like you're saying something and then they're not following. But it sounds like he's not tracking himself. Yeah. Like he's talking, he forgot what he was talking about. He used the wrong word, and then he's like, whatever, I'll go with that. I mean, it is the whatever podcast, so maybe he's just following along with the theme.
Yeah, I have heard him run this exact same argument to other people. So he does have like a script that where like it does start off like this almost every single time, and it almost always ends with like, okay, well, the enforcement is the only thing that really matters. And that's kind of like where he goes. So this isn't new. Like, this isn't like in the conversation, he forgot what he was saying and then he jumped here. Like, there is some weird leap he's making between like them being real and them being actualizable. I just don't know what it is.
If that's not an unplanned mistake, but a planned mistake, that's far worse than what I'm supposed to.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Like, I have seen him do this exact same thing before, like almost exactly.
Yeah, I'd want to see that because that's very strange. Okay. I don't know what to make of that other than it looks like a clear just flipping and equivocating on the meaning of words. And then it looks to me like he's forgetting what he was talking about and changing topics. But if it's a script he's running, again, like a planned mistake is far worse than an unplanned mistake.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. The question is, who has the ability to do what they want to do?
Mm-hmm.
Well, obviously the person with the gun. Do you think
so? Then, what right did that other person actually have?
Well, the person. Okay, maybe we should get clear on what you mean by right. What do you mean by right?
I've already told you like 50 times. It's entitlement absent of duty.
Yeah. So, okay, they have the right, and these rights are, like I believe that I have an entitlement, to my life.
Believe.
Right. Yeah. So if they believe that, to them, they had the right. To the other person, they did not have the right.
Right. So in this case, really what it boils down to is your rights are just force, right? Rights just come down.
Force is the way that the rights are protected.
Well, it's the only way they can really exist.
No, they do exist. You admitted that.
Yeah, he does seem to be, when he says the only way they can exist, like it's like his conception of whether it exists or not, is it exists in virtue of its enforceability?
Yeah. Yep.
So is he an anti-realist then about rights? Because that sounds like an anti-realist view of rights.
I don't know. It's so, like I said, he just goes back and forth this whole time. Like, I do agree. I don't think that he actually understands what he's saying, which is really unfortunate because he says this a lot.
Okay. It's so strange. I don't know what to say about it other than what? Okay.
Yeah.
Concepts exist, right? So like somebody can...
I can grant that they exist, sure.
Right.
So they
do exist without force, quote unquote.
Wait, so hold on.
No, they do exist. You admitted that concepts exist, right? So like somebody can...
I can grant that they exist, sure.
Right. So they do exist without force, quote unquote.
Well, no, not actualizing them though.
Do you have something to say about that? It sounded like you had said something before.
He admits it. He goes, oh, wait, actually, that point that I just gave you pushback on, never mind. I can grant that that's true. Like, that's why I just kind of sit there. Like, I mean, you can tell it on my face. I'm just like, okay, where do we go now? So they're real. If they're real, like they should be enforced, certain ones should be enforced. Then what? Like, I'm just kind of holding my breath waiting for him.
It sounds like he made a major concession here, but it's like he's, okay, fine, I grant that's real, but they're not actualizable. So he's immediately pivoting to something else, almost like,
right.
Fine, I'll grant the concession, but I don't want to dwell on that fact. Let's move on.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
That's frustrating. Like, if someone gets a win, acknowledge their win. Take a moment, pause.
Right.
Give them some credit.
So you didn't get clear what you mean by actualizing.
Yeah, so if you want to have the right to freedom of speech and there's nobody around, I suppose you would have the right to freedom of speech because you're the only mind which has this concept in it. But if you come in contact with another mind who says you don't have the right to freedom of speech, right? How do we determine which mind actually has a right here and which one doesn't? We can't, right? We just say you have a concept in your mind and you have a concept in your mind. But this rights thing, right? This thing doesn't really exist. Just this concept is what exists.
See, you keep saying it doesn't really exist. Of course it exists. Like you said, if you're on the island and nobody's there to infringe upon that right, even if somebody does infringe upon that right, you could still say, well, that person has the right to life. They have the right to speech.
Then people have the right to kill other people if they want to.
Well, that's not what I said. Per that person, they
No, it is what you're saying.
They would
It's an
to them
extension of what you're
that
saying.
statement would be true.
Okay.
To them.
If it is the case that collectively society decides that they have a right to enslave women, they do in fact have that right in reality to do that, don't they?
If you're saying that they're acting on what they believe is to be a right, then yeah, that's what they're doing. That's trivially
So then
true.
what
But
is
that doesn't. So
so
these
then
are
what is-
descriptive claims, though.
Yeah.
I'm not interested.
Well,
in
right now
descriptive
we're just
claims.
making sure that we have this. So I just want to make sure I got this right and that we're not speaking past each other. Rights are real as concepts. Concepts are real. Yes. So therefore, if it is the case that conceptually people want to enslave all women and they call that concept a right, then they would have the right to enslave women, and that would be a real right that they would have, right?
To them,
Yes.
what you're missing is the index. So, like when I say I have a right, I am talking, like I said, about more so a belief or a value. Sometimes is what I'm referencing. So when somebody says, like, even if someone was in prison wrongfully, maybe like they didn't actually commit a crime, but it was believed that they committed a crime, and that person said, "I have the right to be free." Now, they're not saying something nonsensical. You understand like what that person is saying. They're saying, I desire to be free. It's wrong. And what they mean by, it's wrong is it goes against their values for them to be
It just goes against
imprisoned.
it goes against their preferences, right?
Yeah, in that case, so that statement is true.
Yeah, sure, but it's equally true to say, no, we're going to keep you a slave.
Not to that person.
Yeah, not to that person, but just to the other people.
Once again, not to that person, and not to me, certainly.
But if it is the case that rights themselves, being a value of the concept of the mind, these concepts are real, then that would mean that all people who were slaves had the right to be free. That's true. But also that all people who enslave people have the right to enslave them. And that's also equally true, correct?
If what you mean, like we can substitute.
No, this is what you mean.
Yeah. When you say if what you mean, you're not referring to him. You're referring to like if what is meant by the position in question. So he mixed that up. I think you're quite clear here, but maybe that's because I'm very used to the indexing language. So it's like talking about people's names. Like if I say I am Lance, that I is serving as an index there. And, when someone is demanding the non-indexed truth to a set of indexed claims, it would be like if someone says, okay, but the statement I am Lance, is it actually true or actually false, independent of anybody saying the sentence? What?
Like what?
No, that is a nonsense question. The question is presupposing the very view denied by the supposition that the claims in question have an implicit index in them. And so if you're treating the claims here as descriptive claims that are only true relative to whoever's making the claim and it's being indexed to their standards, then of course it's true that when a group of people that think it's okay to own slaves say it's okay for us to own slaves, if what that means is we approve of owning slaves, of course a group of people that approve of owning slaves approve of owning slaves. That's trivially true.
Yeah.
But it sounds like he wants to extract out of that the implication that you approve of them owning slaves, which of course you don't approve of that. So, and this is the standard strategy for critiquing relativism, to give the false impression that everybody has to be some sort of agent relativist that thinks that every culture or every individual legislates their morality in a way that you are obligated to respect. So if some community thinks it's okay to own slaves, you must think it's okay for them to own slaves. And of course, that's not true.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a later part where he says something like, well, you can't really say that like, Islam enslaving women is bad. It's just bad to you. And I'm like, yeah, it's bad to me. Like, that's the point. Like that is quite literally the point. You wouldn't correct somebody if they said pizza is good. You wouldn't be like, well, I mean, maybe you would do this, but it certainly, like, if you semantically broke it down, wouldn't make sense for you to say like, no, pizza is actually bad. But you would come to the realization like, okay, well, no, pizza is just bad to me. Like pizza is actually, it's true that that person is stating that pizza is good to them. That statement is true. Maybe he doesn't know what the word indexical means. But I fear if I would have brought up the like taste preferences thing, that might have thrown for a whole loop, because I know how people feel about those types of things is they go like, you're comparing pizza to morality? Are you serious? Like, are you crazy? It's more serious than that, than your preference for pizza.
Yeah. You can easily handle this though. So check out, I went back on TikTok after a year to talk about what I call the overcomparison fallacy. And I mentioned
I
it in a recent
reposted
blog post. Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm always losing track of who's doing
good.
and saying what. But we could explain it to the audience here. So this is exactly what they would do. And I think it might be strategically wise for you to avoid preference comparisons in certain sorts of hostile or contentious discussions like this, because you're right. People absolutely lose their shit the moment you compare morality to taste preferences, because then they'll go, oh, so you're saying like that your opposition to Hitler is like your preference for ice cream. It's just, I don't like vanilla ice cream. I don't like genocides. It's just, well, you can wake up tomorrow and have a new preference. Maybe you want asparagus flavored ice cream. Maybe you're cool with genocide. Yeah. So they do this thing. It's so ridiculous. And this is what I call the overcomparison fallacy. And the fallacy is thinking that if I compare two things in one respect, then I'm implying that they are similar in every other respect, or some other unspecified set of respects, or that they're similar in general. And so if you compare morality to taste preferences in their metanormative characteristics, if you say both moral claims and food preference claims are best understood as being indexed to the standards of the speaker making the claim, people think, oh, so you're saying they're equally important to you. They're just as they're similar in scope. So if I make a claim about what music I like, and then I make a claim about a moral claim, they'll be like, okay, but why do your music preferences, those don't apply to everybody, but your opposition to murder, that applies to everybody? There's a contradiction. And it's like, no, I'm not comparing them in that respect. You can compare things in terms of what makes them true and not compare them in terms of their scope or their importance, obviously. And yet people do this all the time, where they'll say, you're comparing them with respect to property 1, so you must be implying they're identical with respect to property 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. That's ridiculous. You're an evil idiot. But it's just them being stupid when people do that. Oh, yeah. It's immensely frustrating.
That would be really weird if you compared like two movies and you said like, oh, I really like Inside Out, and I really like, I don't know, what other movie, like Disney movie, I could pick like Cinderella. I like Inside Out and I like Cinderella. They're really great movies. And someone said, well, those movies have two different plots. Why are you comparing those things? Like they're one's about a princess and one's about, I don't know, emotions and feelings or something like that, and puberty. Did you think that I was comparing every single did you think that I was saying they were identical movies? Of course I wasn't saying that. I wasn't saying the plot was the same. I might compare like two different characters to each other. I'm not saying everything about them is the same.
Yeah, you could just endlessly parody this. I could say I really liked many of the scenes in Hacksaw Ridge and Kung Fu Panda. And then someone could say, wait, are you saying Kung Fu Panda is equally as graphic and violent as Hacksaw Ridge? What the hell is wrong with you? You're an idiot. Like one's an animated movie and one's not animated. You can't compare them. Right. Oh, that's another thing people will do, is they'll point to some difference. Doesn't matter what the difference is. They'll point to any old difference between two things and then say you can't compare them because they're different in that respect. So you can't compare Kill Bill and The Lion King. One's animated and one's not animated.
Right.
Yeah, one's animated and one's not. First of all, that's a comparison. Second, even if you're pointing to a difference, that doesn't mean I can't, like, if by comparison you mean similarities. Just because there's differences between things doesn't mean that they can't have similarities.
Yeah.
What the hell is wrong with people? But people do this all the time. They'll say you can't compare that. But what I say to people that say that is, I can compare it because I am comparing them. So apparently you're wrong. I can compare. Of course, they're making a normative claim, like there's something inappropriate about comparing them. They're not actually saying they literally are incapable of doing so. But so I'm being a little silly and facetious in that response. But people have a massive problem with comparisons. They don't understand what comparisons are.
Yeah. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's just like the degree to which we hold like moral claims or something, and they get picky about it. I'm not sure. Yeah.
I have a comment in the chat. So Reflective Journey says, I sort of disagree. Being universalizable is part of the scope. The distinction. So universalizability, that's what scope is about. So, but scope is different from what makes the claim true. So you can have this isn't two sets of orthogonal distinctions. Is the moral proposition, like abortion is wrong, is that made true by my preferences or by the stance independent facts? And then there's the question of like a normative claim, like strawberry ice cream is good or abortion is wrong. Does that apply only to my own conduct or to everybody's conduct? So those are just different distinctions. So universalizability is a feature of scope. Scope can be universalizable or non-universalizable. There are people, and this is not like an unfamiliar notion either, that have personal codes of conduct and they don't have any expectation. Someone might say, I never lie. But they're like, oh, I know that person lied. And they don't judge the person. They're just like, that's my code of conduct. Is that inconceivable to people? Like people act on moral standards that only apply to them all the time.
Yeah, it's kind of like saying, you could say something like, people should drive safely. And then if someone were to go, well, children, can't drive. Oh, okay, well, children are excluded from that set. Like the statement wasn't necessarily universalizable to everybody. That doesn't, sorry, I could just go on about that. That's frustrating.
Yeah, there's just a whole bunch of conceptual mistakes that people make when you draw certain sorts of distinctions and make various sorts of points. I don't know how far that's taken us so far from what he's talking about that I think I lost track of it again. So
no worries.
I think I'm going to take it back again. I don't know where these examples come from either. I don't even think I've seen any of the Kung Fu Panda movies. You know what it is? It's that I always see them on planes.
Oh, I see.
Okay. Yeah. Not that that's relevant.
Yeah.
But it's the case that rights themselves being a value of the concept of the mind, these concepts are real, then that would mean that all people who were slaves had the right to be free. That's true. But also that all people who enslave people have the right to enslave them. And that's also equally true, correct?
If what you mean, like we can substitute.
No, this is what you mean.
If you let me finish sentences, I can do that.
Okay.
So when you have the people who are enslaving other people, if what you mean by those people saying, I have the right to enslave these people, is that those people are, substituting out their words for like, I have the value that these people are enslaved, then to them, that is true. They do, in fact, have that value.
So for you, a right is simply, wait, I'm confused now. Now I'm actually confused on your view. You said a right is just a belief?
Yeah, I think, well, when you were talking about like concepts, yeah.
Okay, if it's just a belief, then it's an equally true belief that these people over here, their right to enslave you exists.
It's equally true, and because the wording, I think people use this wording in a weird way sometimes. What would be more accurate to say is that person desires this, they value this, or they prefer this.
Okay, so what gives them the right to something?
That's what I'm saying, that the right is. So like usually when you talk about, you can talk about rights as social contracts, and maybe they're violating a social contract in that way. But when I say like I have a right to be free, a lot of the times what I'm expressing is like, a very strong desire or something like that.
Yeah, just a belief that you have.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's what those people are saying. So if you're just saying it is true that those people, to them, it is true, I have the right to enslave this person. And if you substitute what they mean by that by I desire to enslave these people or have a strong will to do so, then that's trivially true. You don't disagree with that, certainly.
Well, with your view, no. This is great. You have to concede that the right is real, that people collectively have the right to enslave people, and that is real. Concepts are real.
And what you mean
belief is real.
By right is...
Yeah, he's doing the thing where he's implying that you're pro-slavery now.
It's so scummy. I have no other words for it than and some of it I fear is intentionally scummy. Some of it I fear is like he actually does not understand, but is still trying to be like scummy about it with his like limited understanding. But yeah, I just had really little patience for that.
Yeah, well, what's unfortunate is that I see people make this mistake all the time. And what makes it even worse is that I've seen professional philosophers do this, where they'll imply that anti-realists, they'll make a couple of implications. One is that they'll imply all relativists are agent relativists, which is not true. Yeah. And then they'll imply that all anti-realists they'll say stuff like this. If you're an anti-realist, then all moral positions are equally valid. And so it was just as valid for people to carry out the Holocaust as it is for you to have a cup of tea. They'll say you're committed to that, and like, no, I'm not committed to that. If an anti-realist is committed to the claim in question, it's so trivial that it ends up just being a descriptive claim. Like the anti-realist is committed to the view that when people that think bad things report that they approve of the bad things that they approve of those things. Like, oh no, I think that bad people that think that their actions are good think that their actions are good. How terrible of me.
Right. Yeah. Like, okay. Yeah. The people who think that they're doing good things that I find to be bad think that they're doing good things and I find them bad. Like, you're just repeating. It's almost tautological, like what you're saying.
Yeah, but what they're not doing is giving the analysis of what you're committed to on your analysis.
Right.
They're leaving that under the table and implying that you hold some horrific normative moral view. And this is something Ask Yourself recommends that people do, is when they say these sorts of things, say, give me the analysis on my view. Like, what on given your understanding of what I'm committed to, what am I committed to? Give me the analysis. And then make them unpack what you're committed to, because you're explaining it here, you're unpacking it for him. But if you could get him to unpack it, like, and verbalize, oh, you're committed to thinking that, like, people that want to enslave people are okay with enslaving people, you could be like, yeah, and what's the problem with that?
Yeah.
Is that like,
right,
what's he going to say? Well, yeah, I have a problem with you saying that people are okay with slavery. How dare you think that? What?
Right. Yeah. There's a really difficult thing here where I was trying to not be super hard on him and build a little bit of rapport, which I did a little bit, like trying to make small talk, which, by the way, he does not do very well at. Like, he does not make small talk, period. But I think there's a little bit of debate politics going in there where I'm like, I'm trying to just like keep him on track. And if I start asking him questions, that'll come across as me coming off track. So I need to be careful not to do that, which I just wish. I mean, that's why when he just says those things, I let him say them and then I correct them and go, actually, like, that's fine if you substitute in that set of words for this set of words. Then yes, it is technically true what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the way to handle it. Would you have another discussion with him about this particular topic?
I'd like to. I don't know if I'll get the opportunity to. He was like begging me to come back that day after I left the studio, and then he's been asking me to come back since, but he hasn't gotten clear on like what the details are. So it might be that I have to come back on their terms and talk about something like abortion, which I'm also equally as fine with doing. But yeah, and then maybe I can weasel that in and be like, hey, we should talk about meta-ethics again,
Yeah, I'd like to see that. Yeah, that's one of the things I was curious about, is how this works. Like, how do people get on the show? Do they send out invitations to people, or do you not know?
I am not 100% sure. I know people who have been invited, but I'm wondering if I think they have like an email system. So I think people can also email them. I would love to do like a 2v2 debate if he would let me, because he does that with OnlyFans models, but he didn't allow that to happen with somebody like myself or somebody like Destiny. So I suspect there's probably a reason why. But yeah, I mean, I like, really asked him, I was like, is there somebody else I could bring? I really wanted to bring somebody like Eric or Evan or somebody like that who's more well-versed on these topics. But he said no. He was like, nope, just 1v1, that's it.
Yeah, I wonder who he would have to talk about. Well, I mean, it's going to depend on the topic. So if it's abortion, it's going to be totally different people. I think it's funny. Someone kind of making fun of me here in the comments reflected. And he's like, Lance is learning about networking. Hey. It's true. I am terrible at networking. So yeah, it's actually important for me to ask people.
It just kind of happened one day. Like I said, we were just on TikTok, and then Brian was like, hey, come on the show. And I was like, okay. And I think they probably didn't get what they were expecting out of it. I think they were looking for this, watch Andrew Wilson embarrass this pink-haired feminist. I mean, the title just says it for you. The picture, like, isn't a picture. I say this, and I know this is somewhat off topic. The picture on the thumbnail is not a real picture of me. He edited an old picture of like pink hair that I used to have onto a new picture of me in order to get clickbait. So there's a lot going into that. But yeah, the intent was clear to like paint the picture. So I don't think that he got the type of like, oh, inflamed, crazy, pink-haired feminist, that he wanted out of this video.
All right. Fair enough.
But I think that was, I mean, all that to say, that was the intention, I think, reaching out to me on TikTok.
Gotcha. But then they want to have you back on, so.
Hey, they got
there's
something
for
out of
that.
it. Yeah.
All right, let's keep going.
It's real in the sense that they do in fact believe or value that thing. Yeah, that is
Now,
true
is
that they in fact believe and value
is
those
that
things.
belief that you can hold people in slavery? Is that a belief which I mean, obviously you're against it, right? I'm not
Right.
saying you're
Of
not.
course.
But that belief, this value, which is real.
Okay, well, at least give him that. He said, obviously, you're against that. So there's
Yeah.
something.
A little bit of charity.
Which is, yeah, it's more gracious than I've seen from some moral realists. So, right words too.
This concept, which is true, they actually do have the right to do this. Is that morally worse than your view that they shouldn't?
To me, yeah.
To you. And that's it, only to you, right? Because it doesn't make you feel good, right?
You can say words like that, like you can say, doesn't make me feel good. That would be more in line with somebody who takes some like emotivist view on that type of thing. But I'm fine with saying that, there's a proposition that, that is wrong. And by that, I mean that, that's something that goes against my values.
Got it.
Or my desires or preferences.
So
in a very strong way.
now we've untangled all of that. This argument actually becomes much easier. So the goal of feminism is to push people or push women specifically towards materialism and not duty. And I think that the belief of people in duty is much more important than the belief of people in materialism. So I think that the idea of having duties to nation, the idea that having duties to family, the idea that having duties to community far outweigh the idea of the right to pursue whatever trivial, meaningless material pursuit that you have. That duty should come first, and that society would look better if they did.
Well, that's okay. There's a few things here. That moves from a descriptive claim to like a applied claim, or like a normative claim, or a pragmatic thing. And then there's the other type of thing where it's like, you say feminism has like pushed us towards these things, towards these material.
Yeah, do you want a demonstration for that?
Well, really quickly, you think that feminism is pushing people towards subjectivism and that's bad. Like there's a two-pronged claim there, right?
No, less so towards subjectivism, more so towards materialism.
Okay, well, it kind of seems like you were doing a little bit of equivocating here.
What's the equivocation?
Between subjectivism and materialism. But if you're not, then maybe we can kind of like go back through that.
I didn't bring up subjectivism there, just
well,
materialism.
That was what we were just...
What weren't you talking about that for the last few minutes?
I think he actually might not know what subjectivism is. Now that I'm thinking about this, like I'm like, does he not understand that? Well, I understand that there's different views of relativism, but does he not think that like we were talking? That's why I got really confused. That's why I was like, was our conversation just not about that? Like in my head when you played it, I was like, holy pivot, like we're back to this like weird rights thing now, or the duties thing now.
It's just that you just had a big discussion about metaethics, and then he's saying he's not talking about a metaethical view. He's talking about what is it that he materialism.
Yeah,
I'm very puzzled. What did the conversation have to do with materialism?
That's a great question. Honestly, that's why I like look at him puzzled. I'm like, how I kind of like look around like, am I crazy? Like, did we just not have that convo?
Maybe he thinks I'm not even going to attempt to figure out. I'm like, maybe he thinks this. No, I don't know. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, there's some heavy equivocation.
It looks like it, or it looks like he was digressing, talking about a completely unrelated subject, moves back to the topic of materialism, and then is like not acknowledging the very clear context in which you were obviously talking about some other type of topic for several minutes.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, what's the other explanation? Like severe amnesia? Like what? This is so strange. It's like I'm imagining watching two people talk about like what they're going to have for dinner for 15 minutes, and the person's like, so anyway, so my point is like this is why we should raise the tax rates, and then you're like, wait, weren't we talking about dinner? And they're like, no idea what you're talking about. We're talking about taxes. That's what it looks like. It looks insane.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I don't even know if I would be angry at that point. I think I would be just very confused.
Yeah. I think that's where I was.
Is that how you just felt confused at this point?
I think at multiple points in the conversation, I felt very confused. And that's why I kind of like go back and ask him questions again, like, wait, what do you mean by rights again? Like, hold on a second, because we got here and we're kind of like ping-ponging around. Like, what? Get clear on what you're talking about.
Yeah, but he chastised you for losing track of what he was talking about when it's like he gave a definition like 20 minutes before that. And it's not your fault if he digresses and pivots 17 different times in that 17 minutes. And then you're like, whoa, okay, let's return to that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So yeah, apparently you have an infinite duty to track everything that he says and recall every point, regardless of the context and regardless of how many times he pivots and directs the conversation in a different. I mean, he's like derailing his own derails, and then loses track of his own derails, and then re-rails, and then expects you to be on the same page. It's very, very strange.
Yeah.
I don't know how I would handle that if I was talking to somebody like that. I think I would get really angry and start yelling.
I had the thought, like, somebody made a joke while I was there. They posted some meme. It was like one of your videos, and they said, I think it was it might have been Ethan. He said something like, "Oh, this is Anne right now talking to Andrew," and I was like, I just can't imagine what Lance would say to him right now. I really couldn't. I was like, I was trying not to lose my shit, honestly.
Yeah, I have a problem, which is like, I think people typically see me pretty chill about stuff, and I really lean into trying my best to be charitable. But there's a reason for that, and the reason is like, how do I put this? When I actually do lose my temper, I really lose it, and it's bad, and I don't want that to happen. There's been actually a couple times I've been live where I had to leave, like I just ended the live because I'm like, I do not want to just start screaming at people.
I feel that.
I don't know what would happen in this context. Yeah. So, but like you seem totally chill here.
I'm actually surprised, and I hate admitting this, but like it's kind of nerve-wracking because I know their audience, like I know who's watching. Obviously, I know I have like a few people watching me who are my friends or something, or just doing it to support me. But I knew the majority of the audience was like his fan base or the podcast fan base. And so in my head, I'm like thinking about that constantly. And I'm glad I can't tell from the video. My hands were shaking near the beginning at least. Oh, really? Yeah. I was pretty nervous.
It's anxiety. Yeah. So I can shake because of anxiety, but sometimes I shake because of like adrenaline. Like I get pumped up.
Yeah. That was part of it. It was a mix of both, I think, honestly. But yeah, no, it took a lot, I will say.
Yeah. Maybe this is weird, but I actually kind of like that feeling.
Oh, no, I don't.
Yeah, I like the immense anxiety of being under extreme pressure to perform live. I don't know. I remember being on stage a couple times as a kid for like music performances. And I'm like, whoa, this is kind of a rush. I could see why people are into performing. Didn't do anything with it, but it's cool.
I suspect people get that from also like being on the show or being on TikTok where they know people are watching. I get that. I think most people have that.
Maybe so. I do see somebody mentioning Nathan has a stream. Wait, I shouldn't be advertising Nathan's stream. Don't go watch Nathan's stream. Everybody watching Nathan's stream, watch this one. Of course, that makes no sense because they're watching that one if they're not here.
Oh, no.
Okay. All right. Let's see. How much more of this is there left? Because we're past the 2-hour mark. So I got maybe 15, 20 minutes left in the tank. So I don't know if we're going to finish this. But we have to finish
same.
it.
Okay. I want to say there's not much. There probably is some of this left, but I do only have about like 15, 20 minutes left as well.
Yeah, that's all I got before I'm just going to be done. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Just talking about.
No, what we were talking about is after we untangle all of the concepts, all we're really talking about is just everything reduces to beliefs. So all of these concepts of rights, everything else just reduces, at least to you, to believe. I believe thing. Which is fine. It's just equal for me to say I believe opposite thing, and those are just as morally valuable as the other, at least from your view. Well, that's all I was establishing.
No, that's not true. That's not true, actually. So that's a misunderstanding. So when you say that they're equally morally as valuable, well, they're not equally morally as valuable to me.
Yeah.
And then there's a pragmatic claim where we can kind of discuss after that, like, okay, well, let's say we have conflicting values. Mm-hmm. Then what? What the fuck do we do? It's more so we can then look at, okay, well, what's maybe some underlying values that we share where we can build off of that.
I'm aware of all of that, but no, that would still reduce to relativism then, right? Like, how can you make ever a claim that some other mind, whatever their moral proposition was, if everything is just based on your preference is less good than your preference? How, I don't even know how that can be done.
You don't how you just explained it, where you're saying that the things that are good to you aren't the things that are good to me. So you might say, well, these are subjectively good to me, and therefore they're equally as good as the things that you believe. And my response to that would be, no, I don't believe that, because the things that are good to me are my values. Your values don't meet mine.
Perfect. So then you believe that you are the architect of all morality.
And by that you mean?
Everything for which you believe is the ultimate form of morality.
Ultimate form in
What on earth the ultimate form of morality?
There
So if
is
I
no
say-
ultimate form.
Right. There is no ultimate form. I mean, just do the comparison to food. If I say I like pineapple on pizza, I'm expressing the ultimate form of gastronomy. I'm just telling you what I like. What?
Oh my goodness.
It's
yeah.
like he can't fully extricate himself from thinking in realist terms, and so he's mistakenly thinking that you are declaring yourself the personal authority on what is stands independently right or wrong, and the stance independent moral facts are made true by them being your stances, which of course is not what the view is. The view is it's just stances. There are no stance independent facts.
Yeah.
So it's just him not fully grokking your view and then partially imposing his own misconceptions or his own views onto your views, noticing. So it's like if I said, imagine I think this, you say God doesn't exist, but like clearly God issues us commandments. So how can you both believe that God exists and God doesn't exist and we're issued commandments by God? It doesn't make any sense. God can't issue commandments if he doesn't exist. And you're like, no, but I both think God doesn't exist and God doesn't issue commandments. And you're like, yeah, but God does issue commandments. So what commandments does God issue if you're an atheist? It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
It's as silly as that. It's
right,
so
exactly.
silly.
Yeah, or
Whatever.
something like traffic laws. Like you could just say like, yeah, there's like stance dependent traffic laws about what you should do at a red light or something like that. And he would go like, well, God gives the traffic laws. And so you must think that there are no traffic laws if God doesn't exist. Well, what? No, I'm just saying that there are no like stance independent traffic laws.
Yeah, or you could say the same thing about what side of the road you drive on. Like, what's the correct side of the road to drive on? And if you're like, well, in the UK, it's on the left and in the US, it's on the right. No, but what's the truly correct way?
Right.
If you're like, no, but there is no truly correct way. It's just whatever we agree to. Oh, so it's arbitrary and you can just drive wherever you want and everybody will just smash the cars into each other. No. Nope. Ugh. This is very frustrating to listen to. I think he repeats this point about like ultimate arbiter type stuff several times. I've heard him do this in other discussions too, the ultimate arbiter move.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very strange. We'll see what he does with it here. And I do think this is going to be the end of this.
Yeah.
In what way?
Oh, sorry. Did you have more to say about that? I know I just randomly paused it.
No,
Okay,
you're good.
There's no other and no counter moral claims made to you are ever going to be as good as the moral claims you make.
There can be counter moral claims that are made to me that appeal to my values that maybe I'm not aware of, or that I have like conflicting underlying values
They're
that
only
I'm not
good
currently
because you then prefer
thinking
them,
about that.
right?
Sorry?
The only thing that make them good is that you then prefer them.
Yeah, there could be something like that.
Yeah,
where
so then you would be the ultimate
if I
architect.
adopted them for my morality, right? Like that would make that thing
Well,
good
your morality
to me.
is the only thing that is good, though.
To me.
Well, what else is good except good to you?
So look, I just said that. It's the thing that I am arbiting is my morals, my moral stances.
So then the only way we can have good is if it's good to you.
Yeah.
It's very weird. The only way we can have good is if it's good to you. And it's like, no, things can be good relative to other standards. So that doesn't mean they're good relative to your standard.
Yeah. The amnesia kicked in again, I guess. I don't like he just forgot what we talked about.
I don't think it's maybe it's amnesia. Maybe I think you're not being entirely serious. I don't know, but like I think he's just not understanding the idea. I think he's just straightforwardly not understanding it.
Yeah.
What do you think is going on here at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could attribute this to him getting this from somewhere, but I don't suspect that he reads any like moral philosophy or meta ethics or anything like that. So I really have no idea like who he picked this up from. Like, I want to find the source of it. I want to find the source of the issue. Like, where did you get this rhetoric? Where did you get this confused idea of relativism? Like, why can you not grasp the fact that when I say something's indexical, like that I'm talking about a person saying a statement and that statement being true by virtue of what the person means by it? And I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, maybe in a lot of these discussions, you just got to explain indexicality to people and give them examples of indexicals they already use.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that requires quite a bit of exposition, and I think a lot of people wouldn't have the patience for it. So I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, let's see where how he develops this.
Of course.
So then if that's the case, then all things, you are the ultimate arbiter of goodness.
Of my standard of
There
goodness.
can't be any other standard of goodness.
There is. I agree. Do you think that I am denying that other people have their own standards?
This is circular. I'm
What's
making
circular?
the argument. I don't know why you're not agreeing with it. You only things which are good to you are good.
The things that are good to me are good to
Nothing
me.
else is good except things good to you. Nothing else is good except things which you find
Well, there can
good.
be other people who agree with
That's
the
not
things
my
that I find to be
question.
good.
What's
So
my
then
question?
those things are good to me
Need
and
my-
good to them.
Yeah. So but they're only good because they're good to you.
They're only good because they're good to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's things that are good to me, and I can convince other people.
Can anything be good unless it's good to you?
Are you saying that? Can I approve of something and not approve of something at the same time? Well, no.
Yeah. Right. So then all goodness comes from you.
All goodness comes from me.
It would
No,
have to.
that my standards of good come from me, of course.
Is there any other standard other than yours which is good?
Relative to me,
No.
unless it aligns
So
with
if he says no, so when he says, "Is there any other standard other than yours that's good?" Does he mean an undexed good or an indexed good?
Yeah, that's. I wish I would have pressed him more on that stuff. Like, do you mean are there other objective standards or are there other subjective standards? Of course, there's other subjective standards. Are there other objective standards? No. Like, ugh.
Yeah. So like the question asked could be you could try to say something like this. Look, things can be good to me. They could be good to you. They could be good to anyone. And there's nothing that's good in a non-to sense. There's only good to. There's no such thing
Right.
as just good. So whenever you ask me, is anything good that isn't good to you? You have to disambiguate. Do you mean good to someone else? In which case, of course, yes. If you mean
Right.
good in a non-to way, then no, because nothing can be good in that sense at all. So what
Yeah.
are you asking me? So the question is either going to be a trivial no. So let's say you say this. Okay, things are good to me, and they're good to other things are good to other people. Okay, nothing is good in a non-to sense. So when you ask me, okay, is anything good other than to you? Are you asking me the first one? The answer is trivially yes, because I just said so. Is the answer the second one, like just good in a non-to sense? No, because I just trivially said so. What is there to be confused about here?
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I ask him, like, do you think I'm denying that other people have values? And then the same thing where, like, he says, well, can something be good to you if it's not good to you? I was like, did you just ask me if I can believe something's good and not believe it's good at the same time? Like, no. What? I mean, unless you want to say good in different senses, like you could say, I think pizza is good for my taste pleasure, but pizza is not good for maintaining a healthy weight or something. But those are good indexed to different things. They're not just, there's not some weird metaphysical ooey gooey good, if that's what he's implying.
Yeah, it seems like he's just insistent on there being something that is good in some non-indexed sense, and then he's asking or supposing that you must think that things are good in a non-index sense, and that your indexes make things non-indexically good, which of course is completely nonsensical.
Yeah.
And then when he is confused about your view, he's projecting his confusion onto you as though what you're saying is ridiculous, when it's just
Yeah.
him not understanding what you're saying.
Yeah.
So he's like
exactly.
sitting here smirking and like chuckling at you, and it's really it's very strange to be basically scoffing at someone while you're in the process of completely misunderstanding them.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Oh, that would bother me a lot.
Yeah.
With my idea or value,
Yeah.
then no.
Then you are the ultimate arbiter of goodness.
Of my own.
That's the
What's
only kind that
confusing?
there is. There is
No.
no other kind.
No, there
We've
are-
reduced this like 6 times. It always comes
Look,
back to
if we
be
look
good.
at good as values, right?
Yeah.
I'm not denying that you have values. I'm not denying that Brian has values.
Mhm.
I'm not denying that, Joshua down the road has values.
Yeah.
So there are things that are good to those other people. But relative to me, unless they align with my values, they're not
so
good.
then you are a moral relativist.
Look, I'm fine with if you want to call that moral
Well,
relativism.
what else would it
that's
be
fine.
when you say it's relative to you is relative to me?
So where does that bring us? Look, if I just say, look, I am a moral relativist, fine,
That
whatever
would be,
you want to call it,
yeah,
what
that
label
would
you
be
want to put on it.
fantastic. We at least make some headways, because what I'm saying to you is that from a prescriptive claim, then if it's all just relative, then you can't really say that Islam enslaving women is morally bad. It's just morally bad to you, right? And
No,
because
Yeah, you can't. If those are analytically equivalent, then you can say both.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I just respond to him. I can do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the right response, and it's good that you do this, because I've seen other like if you see like student relativists arguing with like Cliff Connectley or whatever, they often don't do that. They'll be like, "Yeah, I guess you can't," and then they look terrible.
Yeah.
So sorry, I want to hear you say
from a prescriptive claim, then if it's all just relative, then you can't really say that Islam enslaving women is morally bad. It's just morally bad to you, right? And
No, I am
because,
saying that.
and
It is
because
morally bad
it's-
to me.
And because
Yeah.
you can only say it's bad to you, but because it's relative, right? You
It's
can't.
probably bad to a lot of other
But you
people
just
too,
said,
but it is bad to me.
But you just said that it's relative. Like you can't make the claim really, since it's relative.
Wait,
They're
why?
good to them. It's good to me.
Why?
Well, because otherwise, then just admit you're the ultimate arbiter of all goodness.
Look, that even if I accepted that semantic
Yeah.
usage there, that I'm the ultimate arbiter of goodness, which
Yeah.
I would add that asterisk on the end that like, no, I'm the ultimate arbiter of my moral values and my
Uh-huh.
goodness. I mean, that's fine. That doesn't bring us anywhere else. I can still look at people and go, the things that they're doing don't match up with my values. And that
Sure.
to me is bad.
Yeah, but to then necessarily be, and at least it seems to be from all the questions you've answered, that if they don't match up with your values, period, that is what is bad, and only things which match up with your values are what is good, and nothing else is good.
To me.
And well, but
I don't
if it's-
disagree. Do you think
if
that
it's
I
only
think,
focused on you, who else could it be focused on?
do you think, well, those people have their own values and to them things are good.
Uh-huh.
So to them, those
Yes.
things are good. To me, those things are bad and they don't meet my values.
Okay, got it. So then when we're talking about duty, right? And here's my
Got
claim
it.
then.
Concession.
I think
Okay.
that duty to materialism.
Yeah. So
Okay. I got it.
yeah. So is he conceding? Like, so if you just say if you just say fine, let's call that relativism. I'm a relativist. He has nothing further to say at that point.
Yeah, like I said earlier, the hesitation initially was like, okay, well, I don't want to say relativism because I know he's going to bake in a lot to that I would like to clarify instead. So let's draw it out. Let's get to all of the nitty gritty of the concept itself. And if you want to throw a label on that as relativism, fine, wonderful, we can do that. But that's not a concession on my end. That's actually a concession on his end. Like we see here, and he's just like, okay, got it, sure. And that's why I ask him, like, now what? Not now, what do you want to do with this information? You want to label me a relativist? We've talked about what that means, and okay, sure. Like, yeah, like he just gives up. I don't know.
I don't know either. Yeah, it still seems very directionless on his part.
Yeah, he does say something which I wish I would have corrected in the moment, but he said, if it's not focused on you, who else could it be focused on? And that is more of that like language that like, well, if it's not really bad in a sense, it's just really bad focused on you. And it's just a misunderstanding. It's more of that like, you're the ultimate arbiter. Like, I think honestly, I think what moral relativists need to just start doing is going like, yeah, I'm the arbiter of my morals. Sure. Yep. I'm the ultimate arbiter. I'm the architect of my morals. Now what? Like, okay.
Yeah, I think the expectation is that sounds bad, so you're not going to want to embrace it. So if you just do embrace it, what's next? And say, okay, and now what?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more rhetoric, and that does seem pretty rhetorically empty, because if you do embrace it, he doesn't do anything at that point. He's just like, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like a gambit. It's like either you go, no, and you go, no, you are. Ha, I got you. There's a thing you want to deny. But if you just accept it, then he's like, all right, and then he moves on.
Yeah.
So it's like heads he wins, tails he doesn't lose. So he doesn't have any dialectical skin in the game in this discussion.
Yeah, and then he does get to like a closing statement, which is weird because this was not a formal debate at all, like by any means. But at the end he goes, yeah, I think you made multiple concessions during the debate, and I just don't think you want to admit that you made concessions. And I was like, I think honestly, I wonder what he would say if we watched this back together and I went like, hey, yeah, here's, by the way, we can do like concession counter if you really want to get into that kind of, back and forth meta about the debate. I mean, that's a very clear, if that's not a concession, I don't know what is.
Yeah, it looks like 2, maybe 3 concessions so far from him, and I haven't seen any concessions from you. Not really. Like the concessions are acknowledging that you think what you thought what you were saying you thought all along or something. Where
Right.
he's like, so you do mean this, and you're like, yeah, that's what I've been saying for the past 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And he's like,
Yeah.
all right then, as if you've just like given something. He might consider it a concession to say, yeah, fine, whatever, call it relativism.
Yeah. Yeah, which I
Big
never,
deal.
I never denied that I was a relativist
Right.
at all. I was just like, look, we can call it whatever you want. Here's my view.
Okay, so I know this section continues, but I think it gets pretty repetitive, and I think we're about done. We've only got 5 or 10 minutes, so let's see
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
a last clip or two.
Makes things bad. That's my claim. I think that, or I'm sorry, materialism itself generally makes society worse for people to live in. And so I'm going to try to appeal to your values here and ask you, do you think that materialism itself is good for society? Or do you think it's bad for society? The way that I framed materialism,
Material goods can be fulfilling.
that the movement towards materialist goods being fulfilling over other things like duty is bad for society.
I'm not sure what it means to have something like a material good. Maybe you can give me an example of that, a material good being over a duty or something like that. What do you mean?
Is this the end of the meta-ethics? Maybe this is a natural point to wrap it up.
I think it is the end of it. Yeah, I think he gets
Okay.
more back into this weird like materialism talk and then feminism later on.
Okay, I mean, there's lots of interesting stuff there, but 2.5 hours is kind of a natural stop.
Oh yeah, my battery's low.
Okay, so that's it for me. I do know there's been lots of audience interaction. We're not gonna get to that. So I'll just ask if you've got any final commentary or words, and then you could tell us a bit about like if people want to like find your channel and that kind of stuff, where they could find all that. So any final commentary you have, I guess we'll start with.
Cool. Yeah, no, I really appreciated chatting about this. I was really excited when I found out like somebody had sent you the video or like linked it in your Discord server. Because I was like, this is like the perfect person to talk to about this. I have a lot of like the same ideas or like concepts that are shared there. I don't know what the solution is going forward for like Andrew's confusion here. I don't know if it's worth to talk to him about again and to like really hone in on this, or if it's just kind of like okay, he's confused. I got my bit in to try to do that. I have great clips now that I'm going to post to YouTube. But I'm just not sure where to go forward with this. But hopefully he learns. I don't think he did. But yeah.
All right. And I've already made my whole point. Like my points always focus on the meta ethics stuff. So as far as like what you're over on TikTok, but you're here on YouTube as well.
I am, yeah. I think the full username on YouTube is Through the Lens Discourse, and I can send that to you if you want to link it. TikTok is And Debates. Everyone knows that one. And then I have a link tree on all of my social medias, so it will, if you go to my YouTube, you'll see the link tree for everything there, for where to find me. But yeah,
cool. So I'll put links
do.
to that. Yeah, I'll put the links to that in the description.
Cool.
So, but you mostly don't, as far as I understand, don't focus on meta ethics. What are the main things you focus on, just so people get a sense of what they're getting into?
Yeah, a lot of the short form content that I do is politics or stuff kind of feminist adjacent as well. A lot of what I do is I do a little bit of like psychology. I really love academics, just period. I like the social sciences and like humanities, period. So a lot of like my YouTube content focuses around that. I interview people a lot, or I'll go talk to like senators or congressmen about bills that they're passing or working on. I have a few videos on that kind of stuff. So yeah, a lot of it is very politics heavy, but some of it sometimes gets into philosophy, which is fun.
Cool. All right. Okay. So we'll wrap it up there. Thanks for being here. Everyone go check out all the links in the description. So check those out. Like the video. Go check out the other channel that'll also be linked in the description. Subscribe, do all that good stuff. And yeah, we will leave it there. And now it
Awesome.
is outro video time as soon as I can find it. There it is. All right. See y'all later.